Hello and welcome to our sixth part. Today I'm gonna continue the story What If Deku Built the Iron Man Suit Part 4. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a big thumbs up, and to watch more videos like this, subscribe to my channel and turn that bell notification on so you never miss an upload. Now wasting no more time, let's begin.
The internship at the best support company in Japan. Whole week of glorious baby making with Izuku at the Miyashiro Industries. With the best possible equipment. She could barely contain her excitement. According to her boyfriend she didn't, but that was beside the point. Oh, wait. He told her something about going back to school, to have some hero apprenticeship. She pouted a bit at that, but otherwise was happy for him. They could go back home every day, seeing as Tokyo was only half an hour from Musutafu, but Mei didn't want to waste time and money for traveling. So she coaxed Izuku into arranging hotel room as close to their internship as possible. She may have used her lips to silence his possible protest. What she didn't understand was his reaction of disbelief, when he saw that their room had only one bed. She heard him say something about having a talk with Alan, but ignored it. Father should have good contact with his children. After arriving at the Miyashiro Industries they couldn't help but look at the building. It was tall and modern, huge windows and with giant logo. Her mouth watered at the sight of it. She pretty much dreamed about a building like that for her own company. Well, hers and Izuku's, but what's his is hers, so did it really matter? What surprised them the most was that, almost immediately they were taken by the friendly secretary to the enormous lab. She thought that their workshop, alongside launching station, was huge, but this? They could fit everything here at least thrice? And the best part was? It was given to them for their stay here. She expected that they would have to attend some boring meetings with scientists that would tell them do and don't, trying to gloat about how awesome they were. Or have lectures about business, learning how to run your company successfully. Actually that didn't sound too bad. But getting the place with the latest, cutting-edge equipment, built-in assembly line and having access to seemingly unlimited amount of resources? She wasn't the one to question things. Most of the first day was spent by them getting to know machines they never used and upgrading jetpack. Izuku suggested to make it into something that would allow the user to move more freely. She agreed with it. Using hover boots to maneuver in the air wasn't exactly a piece of cake. Not having a holodeable was a bit of nuisance. But Alan put together new blueprints and sent them. Whatever works, she guessed. They abandoned the box for more streamlined oval shape with two thrusters. For maneuverability they added folded wings. The control problem was solved by adding bracers with sensors. Izuku would write the program later, so everything would run smoothly. During their lunch break, they were literally swarmed by workers, mostly inventors. And instead of gloating, they praised their work, asked questions about their babies and even suggested some potential improvements. Then came the question about arc reactor. So Izuku told them a tale about how it was built and run. Most of the crowd was silent, but some mentioned something about needing a drink. She heard them saying that her boyfriend basically created a new field of technology. She was proud of him. Their first night at the hotel was interesting. She was strangely excited and nervous about sharing a bed with Izuku. From his expression, she judged that he was too. At first they just laid next to each other, but she was allured by warmth radiating from him. So she did what she thought was right and plopped her head on his chest, putting her arm around his stomach and tangling their legs together. He tensed a bit, but quickly relaxed, which ended up with him hugging her close to him. Honestly she didn't know when she had fallen asleep, but she knew one thing. There was no freaking way that she would be able to sleep without him at home. The plan for a second day was non-existing, but after coming to lab, they saw a man in fancy business suit, checking out their jetpack. There was something familiar about him, especially his eyes, but she couldn't put her finger on it. He didn't give them a name, but presented himself as a big passionate of science and technology. He wasn't an engineer himself, but his questions were right on point. In turn he gave them tips and small lectures about running the company. But not in the boring voice. He was funny, made all sort of comparisons, mixing it with jokes here and there. This guy was awesome. They asked him to stay and keep them company, on which he gladly agreed. Mei decided to complete the work on the jetpack. As for Izuku, he was checking Puppy's program. He himself admitted that he had absolutely no idea how it was possible for him to gain a consciousness. She knew that parts of Alan's system were used to make the new software for robots, but from what she deduced none were about them archiving the self-awareness. This is interesting, Izuku said absent-mindedly, looking at the lines of code. What is, kid? Man asked, gazing at the monitors. Puppy still has the almost exactly the same software as others' 0 pointers. He informed them, typing quickly on the keyboard. Almost? She questioned, getting more and more interested. Yeah, almost. He highlighted the few lines of code. This is something that I didn't add. So, where did it come from? Man queried curiously. Izuku changed his position into the thinking one and remained silent for a few moments. My guess is, okay. This may go a little bit around it, but yeah, so zero-pointers have a special order to avoid harming participants in any way. They may destroy buildings, roads and so on, but they can't cause damage to human. They link with the cameras around testing sites and robots inside to generate routes that will only scare people. Okay, what about it? May asked, not seeing where this was going. The testing side, where Puppy was, had most of the robots destroyed by students and some of the cameras due to the reckless way of fighting. Plus Puppy was buried underground. So when it rose up, all of the concrete was sent into the air. Uraraka-san was caught under one of the slabs and she was on his route. Being unable to determine a new route and breaking the directive about not harming humans, his system went into overdrive. He explained further. That still doesn't explain the consciousness gain, Man said, frowning a little. My guess is that the learning program kicked in, and due to the connection to the school system, it used internet to teach itself what to do. This changed into a slow process of learning about the world and archiving awareness. Izuku pointed at the screen. Those lines basically say that if the need arises, Puppy will search for the best solution on the matter. Wow. May wrapped her arms around his shoulders. So he's like Alan then? Not exactly. He shook his head. Alan was specially designed to do it. But here Zero Pointer used its system to learn how to deal with presented situation and became Puppy. Do you think we can buy it from school? She questioned, looking at him. It would be a shame to reset it to the basic functions. Getting rid of Puppy wasn't okay with her. She hadn't created him, but this was Izuku's baby. And as his girlfriend it was her job to make sure that all of their adorable children would be safe and get needed love. If you want to go through with it, I suggest for you to open a company, Man said, gaining their attention. Trust me, the taxes for such a huge buy will be much lower for it. And if the school will give you a contract, then it would be even less. Open a company? Yes, 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 hell yeah, she wanted it with Izuku right here, right now. She began jumping around her boyfriend, gazing at him with expectation. Izuku blinked and turned to the man. Can we even do it? I mean, we're not adults yet. Man just chuckled at them. Normally no, but this old fox knows some loopholes in the system. If you want, I can get a papers and help you with this, he proposed with smirk. What are you even waiting for? Go and come back fast, May ordered him, grinning brightly. Man laughed loudly and left their lab in hurry. She liked him even more. You know, we should celebrate it somehow, Izuku suggested, his overjoyed eyes gazing at her. Plopping down on his lap and wrapping her arm around his neck, May looked at him with love. I know how. She kissed him with passion, just like the first time, when it happened. Izuku returned it gladly, making their kiss even better. Momo was excited, slightly embarrassed and scared. All at once. And it was because of her internship. While Aizawa-sensei took her class to the train station, she remained in school. Reason? She was interning with a teacher from their school. The hero that Izuku suggested to her. Opening the door to the staff room, she was greeted with a sight of grinning Midnight in her hero costume. Finally. I thought that you run away somewhere, Heroine said to her. Sorry for the wait. Momo bowed lightly. As a class president I had to make sure that my classmates had all necessary things. Midnight waved her hand at her. It's fine, don't sweat about it. But, her tone changed to more dangerous one. Her eyes had feral look and her tongue licked her lips slowly. Don't make a habit out of it. Otherwise, I might have to punish you. A chill ran down her spine. Now she understood why Aizawa-sensei gave her his condolences when he saw her choice. You couldn't tell what this woman would do. Yes, sir. And just like that, Midnight turned back to her happy persona, smiling brightly at her. Good. Now go change and grab your luggage. We're going to another city. Momo blinked at her, not knowing about it before. If I may ask, why? Heroine hummed and begun checking paper on the table. Hosu Police Department requested heroes to do more patrols, due to the recent attack of Hero Killer. And as a freelancer of sort, I decided to take it. Besides, it'll be a good opportunity to show you how to operate during the time when people aren't feeling safe, Midnight explained. She nodded at the arguments. Reasons were fine with her. What about a hero killer? He may strike again. She didn't want to run at that villain. That's true, but if this happens, then he would have a small army of heroes to get through. Heroine turned to her and smiled reassuringly. Don't worry, Yaoyorozu, I won't allow my beautiful apprentice to be harmed. Momo was glad for that and felt a bit better, but did that woman really needed to call her apprentice? She wasn't exactly aiming to become a hero like R-rated hero, Midnight. After the train ride and dropping their stuff at the hotel, she went at her first patrol. Talk about exciting. She followed Heroine advices and kept looking around, searching for potential problems. So far it was quiet, the only disturbance came from people recognizing her from sports festival. Some praised her performance, telling her that they were rooting for her, others wanted her autograph and picture. Midnight encouraged her to do it, saying that it made people happy and at ease. During their walk she saw many heroes. Some known, some not, but all of them diligently patrolled the streets. She caught the sight of her classmate, Iida-san. She waved at him, but he didn't give any response. Weird. Teen was very polite and always greeted people with respect. She guessed that he wanted to do his duty right. First day of her internship ended with nothing except pictures, autographs, and hurt feet. However, Midnight explained her a little more meticulously about how exactly heroes were getting paid and about the different types of codes used for emergencies. So it wasn't absolutely wasted. Message from Kendo-chan, who whined about her internship with Uwabami, made her glad that she listened to Izuku. Her mind wandered towards her friends. They texted her, telling her how they were doing. She was surprised when she saw the sign saying, Miyashiro Industries. Did her parents have something to do with it? She would ask them after coming back home. But she was glad for baby-making duo. She sighed loudly. She already missed them terribly. Oh ho ho. I know that sound. Midnight, in her PJs, said, sitting down on her bed with teasing smirk. What sound? Momo questioned, not knowing what was going inside Heroine's head. That sigh you just made. It's the one when you miss someone, who's very close to you, woman explained. Well, I'm missing Izuku and Mei. We won't see each other for a week, she admitted sadly. Genius boy and that crazy, pink girl? Midnight asked interested. Yes. They're my best friends, she said, smiling widely. Honestly, it's the first time that we're not seeing each other for so long. Heroine just looked at her for a moment, before smirking. You like them? Woman stated with chuckle. Correction. You love them, she told her, wiggling her brows. What? Momo shouted, looking with wide eyes at the Midnight. No, we're just good friends. There was no way that she was in love with them. But why did her heart beat stronger at the thought? Heroine's smirk widened as she leaned forward. Sure, but let me ask you something. What do you feel when you're with them? She blinked at the question. Her mind supplied her with all kinds of memories she spent with baby-making duo. I feel happy. Overjoyed. Every time, when there's a lunchtime or our lessons end, I'm looking for them. I thrive to be with them. Nice. Now how would you describe them? Midnight pushed forward. Momo took a moment to collect her thoughts. Well, Izuku is the most intelligent person I've ever met. He's hardworking, passionate, very kind and polite towards others. He's very good at analyzing people and their quirks. His smiles can turn into the miniature sun. Also, he can make a perfect impression of Aizawa-sensei. Heroine laughed at the last one. Okay, what about Hatsume? She's very energetic and touchy. Not that's a bad thing. Like Izuku, Mei is very serious about her work as an inventor. She has a strange moments, when she just knows what to do or say to make your day better. Despite being seemingly clueless, she's rather empathic. Like you've said, she's a bit crazy, but in a good way. Nice going. But what about their bodies? Do you find them attractive? Midnight questioned, licking her lips. The mental images of her friends flashed before her eyes. She remembered Izuku in his pilot suit, how tightly it fitted him, showing his figure. She remembered his fluffy, curly hair, that she wanted to pet all day long. His bright, emerald eyes, that from time to time shone. As for Mei, holy crap. She saw her naked, when she helped Recovery Girl change her friend from wet clothes. She saw her best friend in the birth suit. Her cheeks heated up and she was very sure that her whole body turned red. Why yes, they're very attractive, she replied in whisper. Both? Midnight dug further. Yes, both. Momo hid her face in her hands. Just checking. Last question. Do you have a strange feeling when they're near you or touch you? Like having a knot in your stomach or your heart beating faster? Taking a moment to collect herself, she peeked at the heroine from behind her fingers, every time. Congratulations. Woman exclaimed happily. You're bisexual and in love with two people. The words reached her and her brain processed them many times. In the end her mind decided to the one thing. pass out with huge, overjoyed grin on her face. It was strange to see an unfamiliar ceiling when she opened her eyes. She opened her eyes and realized she was at her internship with Midnight at Hosu. While on patrol, Heroine gave her more information about their line of work. Then they went back to the hotel and pause abruptly. She sat up, her thoughts racing backwards in time to yesterday's night at 10 times the speed. She told her about her dear friends during their conversation, and she was filled with joy. She settled in and gave a contented squeal, then a girly giggle. Momo Yaoyorozu was infatuated. How on earth could she be so blind? Really? She should be an authority on the subject because she has read so many romance manga. She didn't care then, though. Why? Since she was enamored. She presented the strongest case she could, and those who disagreed with it had to accept it. Leaning against the bathroom doorway, Midnight smirked and said, "Oh, I see someone is in good mood today." Momo took a deep breath and turned to face the heroine. "I am," she said with a broad smile, but a frown soon appeared. "However, what should I do now?" she asked, staring at the woman. Midnight approached the bed and took a seat. "Isn't it obvious? You go and tell them." For her, that was a little too simple. Her crushes were only recently revealed to her. Apart from that, could she even say, "But won't I have to choose?" Her heart gave her a sharp squeeze. That was her response, then. Heroine's eyebrow shot up. "It's the most natural thing in the world," the woman told her. "Why would even you choose? You can be with both." Momo stared at Midnight, unable to comprehend her meaning. "I mean, since quirks came into play, many things changed in society. Homosexuality and bisexuality are normal nowadays. As for polyamorous relations, they became popular about 100 years ago. In Japan, polyamorous marriages are legal for about 76 years now," Heroine replied calmly. The information made her gasp uncontrollably. She was unaware that those were typical occurrences. Thus, there was hope that she would end up with Mei and Izuku. Dubious, she asked, would they even want to be with me? She was afraid she would be rejected. With a laugh at her own words, Midnight shook her head. "Are you kidding me? Just from what you told me yesterday, I can tell that they care deeply about you. I can bet my money that they have feelings for you as well." Woman replied with a genuine smile. She winked playfully and said, "If you want, I could help you." With hope, Momo asked, "Would you?" Having failed at romance manga, this was her chance. Then came the feral look. "Of course. I love good romance. By the time I'm done with you, those two will beg to be with you. But, if you truly want my help, then I must declare you my official apprentice. And that means you must call me mistress." Momo gave a loud swallow. Were her possible connections to the baby-making pair worth it? Ever since reading her first romance, she had fantasized about sacrificing her dignity to obtain something. She said, looking directly into Midnight's eyes, "When do we start, mistress?" Izuku gave a shudder. He noticed that his girlfriend had stopped fiddling with her new jetpack and special goggles. "Mei, did you also just had a feeling that made you both extremely happy and terrified?" She gave him a look and gave a forceful nod. "Do you know what this could be about?" Before returning to his work, he said, "No idea. It turns out it wasn't all that horrible being R-rated hero's apprentice." Heroine led her to the large gym in the hotel and started teaching her even more effective fighting techniques. While Midnight was a captured hero, there were occasions when she was unable to use her quirk because enemies were waiting for her or because doing so would have put her allies to sleep. The woman then taught her how to fight dirty, which entailed taking advantage of every situation. Take hold of their hair, strike them in delicate areas, apply pressure with their weight, and beat them with various objects. In essence, exert every effort to bring down your rival. Izuku was correct. She made a fantastic choice in Heroine. Yes, she was able to produce a great deal, but doing so depleted her fat reserves and thus her energy. She had to think it through. They essentially spent 2 hours, making out with Floor, as her mistress put it, before going on a quick patrol through the city. In the hopes of getting some response, they would perform one more at night. She was unable to deny her desire to experience an adrenaline rush. Besides, that was the main focus of the internship. Experience. Momo's gaze followed her gaze when she noticed someone pointing up into the sky. She noticed a black drone circling the area. She found it strangely familiar. She was sitting with Mei outside the launching station when her mind brought back memories. The girl wanted to try out a new flying apparatus. Upon further reflection, she realized that those turbines were identical. Did her pals have a specific request to fulfill those? She ought to question them afterwards. Upon returning and dressing in civilian clothes, Midnight started a unique lesson. The ability to trick and question people, which would also help her win over her crushes. Additionally, how to make better use of your body in simpler turns. It embarrassed her. She once had a unique teacher who made her walk around her room while wearing heels and a book on her head. To become adept at moving in a ladylike manner, the lessons she learned from her mistress were utterly unladylike. However, it gave her a strange sense of liberation. Her body just picked up on this movement as if it were second nature because there was something organic about it. She turned into a tomato when Midnight called her a natural seducer. She wasn't a flirt, she simply reasoned that it might be helpful later on and might even cause her love objects to become enamored with her. The night passed quickly, even before she realized it. Her mistress was correct. Something had happened. As soon as they entered the so-called bad part of the Hosu, a robbery immediately ensued. A pair of men wearing masks attempted to rob a small business. They appeared to have enough eccentricities. They were not carrying any weapons or knives. First she secured the area and people, per Midnight's instructions and protocol. She entered after making sure that no civilians were inside, only to have to duck one of the robbers as he shot out the door. She cast a quick glance at Heroine, who was getting herself upright after being thrown. Mistress gave her a wink before pursuing the other man. As she considered the message, she made handcuffs. As she got closer to the fallen men, she had to duck to dodge his wildly extended nails. The robber got to his feet quickly, but his left leg was limping. Trying to pierce her with his claws, he lunged at her. Rather than retreating, she moved into his personal space. Momo kicked his left shin while gracefully avoiding his slashes and grabbing his arm. His face struck the pavement, and he groaned in agony. She cuffed his wrist, twisting his arm. While he was sleeping, she took hold of his other arm and presented it with a steel bracelet. She turned to face the store again and saw the heroine pulling out the other man, who looked to be unconscious. The woman grinned and said, "Good job, Creata." She stood up and said, "Thank you, Midnight." Heroine looked at her fiercely and said, "Ah, that's not how my cute, little apprentice is supposed to call me." Momo said, "Thank you, Mistress," while covering her flushed face from view. In public, how was she supposed to refer to her like that? In private, she could hardly manage it. Following her humiliation and the police apprehending the robbers, they resumed their patrol. She noticed additional drones hovering over them, primarily examining the alleys. She brushed it off for the time being, knowing that she would ask Izuku or Mei the answers later. They stopped car thieves, muggings, and even a crazy arsonist. They also saw police pursuing an inebriated driver who was driving carelessly. She wanted to do something to assist, but Midnight pointed out that they couldn't stop a car that was speeding. With reluctance, she acknowledged that there was nothing she could do. Mistress called her, putting her hand on her shoulder and saying, "Hey, I know it can be frustrating, not being able to help. But you're not the only hero. Focus on doing what you can," the woman said gently. Momo gave her words a nod. Heroine was right. She had only recently started her journey as a hero, and part of her job was to figure out when it was appropriate to take action or not. One more important lesson learned. Someone screamed before they could do their duty again. As she turned around, she noticed a purse thief attempting to get through the throng. She noticed her giving her the thumbs up at Midnight. She smiles and speeds in the direction of the runner. With a swift thought, she leapt to her feet and made a rollerblade. Struggling mightily, she soon caught up and saw a small boy, maybe 10 years old. With a furrowed brow, she moved ahead of the child and directly moved into his path. Boy ran straight into her after catching a glimpse of her. She grabbed his shoulder and pressed him gently up against a wall. He was having some difficulty, but when he realized there was nothing he could do, the child gave up. Not long after, Midnight and the older woman arrived. Granny took out her purse and said, "Thank you, hero." She gave the boy a quick look and gave him a sneer. Lady turned away and said, "You should put that little villain into some juvenile detention center. They always start small." A villain? That word was strong. This boy is not what Momo would call him. When Izuku told her, she recalled how this word is far too often used to characterize any unlawful activity. It was said that even the smallest of offenders were villains. She felt that something wasn't quite right. Was this the way society was always? She asked softly, kneeling down and looking at the child who was frowning at her, "Why did you do it?" Boy scowled and turned away for her, asking, "Why do you care?" She firmly stated, smiling slightly at him, "Because I want to know. I'm still a heroine in training, but I still want to help people. It doesn't matter to me who you were and what you've done." Child gave her a doubtful peek. "Me and my sister are poor. I wanted to get us something to eat, but we don't have any money." She tipped her head and said, Couldn't you ask your parents for some money? Boy said angrily, they're not at home. Probably drunk somewhere, again. Momo scowled intensely. She was unable to truly comprehend the struggles he was facing. Her parents made an effort to be there for her no matter what. In addition, she had an opulent upbringing and had everything she could possibly want, just not to the point of being overindulged. She looked at Midnight, unsure of what to do next. Heroine turned to face the officers who had just arrived. One of them arrived after a short while and, using all of their gentleness, helped the boy get into the police car. Heroine reassured her, "Don't worry about him." With a small smile. "I instructed them to take him home and get him and his sister a supper." Momo inquired, "What about the parents?" With curiosity. She hoped the sister wouldn't have to live with such awful people. The woman patted her on the head and said, "On the side note, you did good here. Most likely they will have a case in the court." She spoke candidly, saying, "I just thought it was wrong to assume things about him. He's still young." Mistress gave her a warm smile. "You will become a great hero one day, Creata." Nezu finally had the opportunity to meet with the parents of young Bakugo after leaving countless messages and phone calls. He began to think that they were deliberately ignoring him. He had a positive first impression of the boy's father. He appeared to be a kind, courteous, and soft-spoken man. Most importantly to Nezu, he offered her a cup of tea. He sipped from his cup and looked up at Bakugo-san. After so many attempts to make contact, it was understandable that the man was a little tense. Nezu smiled slightly to set a nice tone for their conversation. "Although it took a while, I'm happy that we can finally have a chat." Bakugo-san timidly said, "Yes, I apologize. My wife and I are pretty busy with our work." Nezu asked interestedly, "No worries, it's completely understandable. Speaking of, is your wife joining us?" He desired to speak with the troublesome student's parents. The man gave a headshake. "Unfortunately no, she got a call and had to go. Sorry for the inconvenience." With that, he nodded without expressing his displeasure. He said, taking another sip from his cup, "That's okay. Things like that happens." And then caressed his paws on his lap. "Now, let us get to the point of my visit." Bakugo-san turned to face him and replied, "Of course. You've said that it's very important." He made the decision to begin by asking a seemingly straightforward question. "Did young Bakugo said that he's meeting with our school psychologist?" The man's eyes got bigger. "No, he hadn't tell us a word about it." Nezu gave a slight frown and nodded. His aggressive behavior is something that can't be overlooked. Sakura-san furrowed his brow. "I know that Katsuki can be rough and loud, but is it really that big of a problem?" He let out a small sigh, hoping that the information he was about to share wouldn't be too much for a man to handle. "Your son's actions could lead to his classmate's death during exercise, but you and your wife weren't told about it." Bakugo-san's hands started to shake and he turned white. After a few mouth openings, he eventually formed a half-whispered sentence. Is that student all right?" Nezu let himself crack a small smile. Unlike his son, who dismissed it, this man could at least recognize the seriousness of the situation. "Yes, young Yaoyorozu is perfectly fine." Bakugo-san sighed and began to ease up. "That's good to hear. Wait, Yaoyorozu? Isn't that the girl that Katsuki fought at the festival? The one with black hair and quirk that made things pop out from her skin?" Nezu nodded and said, "Yes, that's the one. While we're at it, what are your thoughts about the match?" The man scratched his temple and bit his lip. He was honest when he said, "Although I'm happy for him that he won, I think that he went too far with it." That he did. If it wasn't for Recovery Girl, young Yaoyorozu's life could be in danger. Nezu sighed. Bakugo-san fell to his knees. He seemed genuinely sorry, saying, "I'm terribly sorry for my son's action. Thank you for that. You see, I'm looking for a reason for young Bakugo's behavior. I've already visited his previous school. While teachers praised him, students told me that he was a bully. Everyone who was in his way, and I quote here, got at least one explosion to their faces." Nezu clarified, in the hopes that the boy's father would his son. Man said, looking completely perplexed, I was not aware of that. Every time, when I went for a parent-teacher meeting, I was told just how great of a student Katsuki was." Nezu frowned a little, but then quickly put his expression back to neutral. "I see. Do you have any idea from where this kind of behavior may come from?" Bakugo-san paused for a short while to collect his thoughts. Bitterly, he said, "I think that my wife could be partially to blame for some of this. Mitsuki is fixated about things being perfect and our son being strong. Ever since he got his quirk and told us that he wanted to be a hero, she became pushy with him. That was incredibly useful information. It was now certain that young Bakugo's attitude issues originated at home. Things were made worse by the school and the children who wanted to be friends with him because of his strong quirk. Nezu grinned courteously and said, "Thank you for that, Bakugo-san. May I inquire if you intend to banish Katsuki?" the slightly fearful question asked. "For now I gave your son the ultimatum. Either he fixes his unacceptable behavior or he's transferred to general education. But if everything fails, then I'd have no other option but to do it." Nezu was hoping that this wouldn't be the case. Bakugo-san expressed gratitude, saying, "I see. Thank you for your visit and honesty, Principal." Even though it was only one day, he still thought it was unreal. At 15 years old, he had already completed 3 months of high school and was living independently. Izuku found it difficult to believe that. The same is true of becoming the world's youngest multi-billionaire today. Together, he and Mei determined that he ought to be the president. She took a small cut because he had invested the majority of the company's funds. Nevertheless, his girlfriend was content. For them, it was a very significant step. Mei might have agreed to their company's name after he persuaded her. Though Hatsumiya Industries sounded appealing, his true intention was to honor Marvel Entertainment. Inc. Iron Man would not exist without them, and he would probably still be at the bottom of a pit of self-pity. He was deeply saddened by Marvel's sudden bankruptcy and permanent closure following the appearance of Quirks. He thus called his business Marvel Industries in remembrance of it. He also read through thousands of messages from various companies asking him to share his arc reactor while he was in business mode. A Minister of Resources and Energy even emailed him with a proposal for a deal. Humans desired a more potent and environmentally friendly power source to replace nuclear power. That gave him great satisfaction. His bank account and him. Not that he was a money-grubbing type. There were also a good number of messages, primarily from the military, asking him to sell them his suit. He gave each of them a straightforward no, in the true sense. He would never be able to accomplish it. Ready to take down its targets with a real weapon in its Iron Man suit? It would have to be preyed upon from his lifeless, frigid hands. Please pardon him for not wanting to pull the trigger that could spark the outbreak of the Third World War. America was the source of yet another surprise. As it happens, some people still like Marvel. Compared to the comic books and movie versions, the internet was nearly overflowing with pictures of him in his armor after he was spotted at the sports festival. He grinned broadly when they referred to him as the real-life Tony Stark. He registered and responded to a few inquiries on the most well-read blog. It goes without saying that people were happy. Mei exclaimed, "It's ready," from across the lab. Izuku noticed her bouncing around the workbench as he got up from the computer and approached her. It had the new jetpack, sensor-equipped bracers, and specialty goggles on it. Every piece painted black. "Our new baby is ready to go." Izuku gave her a cheek kiss while giggling at her eagerness. With doubt, he inquired, "Did you test it?" She gave him a wounded expression. "Of course. I want this adorable child of yours to succeed." "And there were no blasts?" he asked, raising an eyebrow. With a proud push of her chest out, she placed her hands on her hips. "I'm a reformed inventor thanks to you. I don't know just how much time I've saved thanks to following your way of thinking." That was good news for Izuku. He was not interested in hearing complaints about Mei completely ruining a test site. It could be disastrous for them to have the strongest corporation in Japan working against them when they were just getting started. She grabbed the goggles and said, "Why did you want to add that moistening feature to the goggles anyway?" He gave her a small smile. He explained, earning a blink and a look of confusion, "I want to give this baby to Aizawa-san as a thank you for taking me as an intern." Another blink. Momo's homeroom teacher. With a sigh, he introduced her to the hobo caterpillar. "Oh, him. Why didn't you say so earlier?" she exclaimed, clearly indicating how unhappy he was. "But if he's going to fly with this, then he should get some sort of jumpsuit." He looked at the clock over the doorway while petting her hair. He had to get his belongings together. "I've got it covered." Mei gave him a firm hug, resting her chin on his chest and meeting his eyes directly. She gave him a small pout and said, "It will be boring without you." He leaned in and gave her a quick kiss, saying, "Sorry for that. You can always watch my suit camera for some action." As she played with his hair, she hummed. She soon smiled, saying, "It won't be the same. But at least I'll have something to do in the meantime." He inquired, "Oh yeah, Puppy's new body, right? Just to be certain." "Yup," she exclaimed, bouncing a little. "You're sure that Principal is okay with selling him to us?" He said that he could even give Puppy to us for free, but I denied it. "We're signing the papers, after I'm at school." Izuku chuckled. It was time for him to be home. with his accidental child. Excellent. So nothing too big, because we want him to help around the lab, right? May asked, as she was composing a message to Alan on the computer. He gathered everything to the case and said, yes, it would be easier to interact with him, so maybe somewhere around the adult's size. Okay, I'll finish it up, she said, turning the chair to face him. Hey, what about the big body? Izuku took up his posture of thought. Would they require it? Not really. He might just move Puppy into the new body permanently and remove all traces of the pointer drives. But there was something alluring about owning a massive robot capable of complete destruction. For now we're going to keep it with the rest in the magazine. If we need, we can do something later with it. All right, May said with a smile before returning to her work. Because his girlfriend wanted to say goodbye, he nearly missed his train. For a moment, he wondered when she learned to kiss in that manner, not because he was against it. When he returned to Musutafu and entered Nezu's office, the principal and Aizawa-san welcomed him and showed him around the tablet where they were viewing drone feeds. Nezu gestured for young Midoriya to sit, saying, right on time, young Midoriya. Have the drones discovered anything? He inquired, glancing at the tablet. Alan told him, so far it's clear, sir, Hero Killer is still hiding. Aizawa-san said in a somewhat irritated tone, that or he's run away from the city. With all the heroes patrolling the area he might got scared off. Izuku opened the folder containing Stain's information and said, from his file, it's rather unlikely. He usually kills 3-4 heroes, who he thinks aren't suited for a job, before relocating. And so far only Ingenium was attacked. Nezu inquired with interest, speaking of, how is the prosthetic? The man was no longer a student, but even so, he was someone he truly cared about. Izuku cheerfully replied, pretty much done. We're still before the first fitting, but otherwise it's ready. If all went well, his business would be able to provide society with its first product. Aizawa-san tilted his head to look at the item and said, what's in the case, kid? He gave me a big smile. Hiro merely raised an eyebrow, waiting for him to say, actually that's something for you, Eraser Head. It's a thank you gift for agreeing with interning me. You can take the whole thing or just the goggles. Placing the case on the table, he opened it and revealed its contents. It's modified jetpack that May made. We gave it aerodynamic shape and folded wings to allow better maneuverability. The bracers have sensors in them that send the information to the computer, which steers the wigs. Also they're reinforced, so it's possible for them to block some hits. Just don't go crazy with them. As for goggles, they have a few functions, like distance measurement and aim support. But the feature that will no doubt catch your attention is the special layer, that is going to help you with your dry eye problem. At the lab I've got prepared the special suit, that will help you with keeping your body warm while flying. It's made from durable material, so it won't tear easily while fighting. Izuku explained calmly, passing the goggles with red-tinted glass to Aizawa-san. After putting them on, Eraserhead surveyed the space. He didn't say anything for a short while, and then a tiny smile appeared on his lips. Nice work, Midoriya. Glad for his and May's success, he nodded and said, thank you, sir. Nezu inquired, examining a bracelet, how is it called, young Midoriya? Izuku laughed shyly and scratched his cheek. He glanced at Aizawa-san and said, we haven't given it a name yet. But seeing as it's for underground hero, who works mostly at night, how about Night Raven? The man shrugged and pushed up his goggles. His voice took on a hint of edge as he said, good name as any. I'm more interested with your information gathering skills. We saw that during a festival you were well prepared for your competition. Almost like you had strategies developed beforehand. Izuku glanced at Nezu, who was staring at him and waiting for his response. With an innocent smile, he shrugged slightly in response. I may have hacked into the school cameras system and watch every first-year student, gathering all and any information, which then I used to make profiles about them. That helped me to pretty much nullify any potential threat. There was quiet at first. Uncomfortable, unsettling silence. That was not the kind of response he was expecting. But it was not long before Nezu's wild laughter broke through. On the other hand, Aizawa-san's face was split in half by a huge, shit-eating smile. That was closer to his original idea. Eraserhead asked, hopeful, you sure you don't want to transfer to my class? He tried to sound sorry, saying, sorry, but I need my support license to run my company successfully. Besides I think without me, May would revert to her old ways and Powerloader would drunk himself to death. That made him laugh. Nezu said, obviously finding the situation funny, right? Kon-san complained that since young Hatsume moved out with you, he have lost his drinking buddy. Aizawa-san stood up and took the case, saying, "Anyway, get yourself ready, kid. I'm taking you for your first patrol. Besides, you need to teach me how to operate that thing." His heart pounded more vigorously. That was it. His first action toward becoming a hero. He would take whatever experience he could from it. Even if it meant spending the next 72 hours awake. Yes, sir. Nighttime flying through the sky had a calming effect. Perhaps there wasn't as much sun or noise outside. Izuku felt like he could fly all night long, just for fun, even though he didn't really know. After completing his internship, perhaps he could manage it. Idea for a later time. Glancing over his shoulder, he saw a racer head soaring a short distance behind him. Surprisingly quickly, Aizawa-san mastered the Night Raven's control. Izuku was positive the man was having fun with his new equipment, even though he knew the teacher wouldn't acknowledge it. On the second day of his internship with a racer head, he couldn't contain the smile that kept coming to his lips. He was ecstatic that, even if it was only for a few days, he was finally playing the hero. If there wasn't a police pursuit, the first one would be completely boring. Despite the office's best efforts to stop him, the motorcyclist continued to accelerate. With Aizawa-san's blessing, Izuku descended from the sky and captured the rider. He thought the fact that the man was wearing headphones and was unaware of the siren was the funniest part. Apart from that, he had a lot of quizzes that a racer created for him. They included first aid, multiple protocols, and a hero law. For a moment he wondered why cats were in every example, but dismissed it as man's kink. Aizawa-san drove him to the bone during the daytime sparring sessions. Izuku was forced to acknowledge that a racer was a merciless foe who would fight in dirty ways if needed. But he accepted the challenge with gusto and gave it his all. Which caused him to see the floor more often than he had in his entire life. A racer asked him if he could fix his capture gear so that it could be used again, as Night Raven was not really compatible with a scarf. He had an idea quickly and changed the bracers so that they could hold a roll of the material and shoot it out when needed. When they tested it for an hour before their night patrol, Aizawa-san appeared satisfied with it. They had discovered a possible drug deal going on between two groups while soaring high over the harbor. After coming to a safe stop near a building, they watched them for a minute. Aizawa-san asked, "Thoughts, kid?" Izuku made his camera zoom in while humming. 8 people, 4 with guns. How about I provide the distraction? During this you can take out 2 gunners and I'll blast other 2. Then we see what they will do. Izuku suggested, turning to the hero. A racer raised an eyebrow. Man sounded oddly amused at the idea. You want to run a distraction? You realize that there is a possibility that they're going to shoot you right off the bat? With a small shrug, he got up. Their caliber won't pierce through my armor. Alan said slyly, look at him, showing off his toy. Disregarding the AI, Izuku took off. He landed on the ground and made a circle around the dealers, attracting their attention. The response was in the form of guns aimed at him, saying, "Hello, guys. How's the business going?" One guy's hands took on the grotesque appearance of claws. He raised his arms and said, "Wow, no need to be hostile. I just wanted to catch some fishes." Aizawa-san kicked the gunner in the head as he descended from the sky before they could take any action. Using his capture gear with haste, he wrapped the material around the other person's face and applied force, causing the thug to fall to the ground. Izuku downed 2 other gunners with a low-powered blast during this time. Though he was prepared for a fight, a racer gave the order in his typically worn-out voice, "Surrender now. Police is on their way." The lone woman in the room stepped forward and screamed, but quickly came to a stop, looking completely confused. Her peculiarity, then, needs to center on her voice, much like present Mike's. The man's hands reverted to their original form as he charged Izuku, striking him in the helmet. He was slightly stunned by hit, but other than that, he was fine. The man, meanwhile, was silently hissing while holding his palm. He acknowledged that striking a hard object with a punch isn't always a good idea before striking the thug in the temple. Then he swiftly grabbed him and threw him over his shoulder, causing him to hit the concrete with pain. Izuku turned around and saw a racer neutralizing others while switching between them with ease. One of the vendors attempted to flee. He applauded, locking on to the man and saying, "Shoot out Ebola." A weapon shot out of the side of the dealer's left thigh, entwining itself around his legs and sending him sprawling to the ground. The officer was given the incident report by the police when they arrived. It turns out that the deal involved a drug called Trigger, which made a person's quirk stronger over time. Izuku recalled reading that the Yakuza had used it prior to All Might's appearance in the play. Looking at his notepad, the officer said, "Okay, looks like it's all." The woman turned to face Izuku, saying, "Oh, Wait, one more thing. Even as an intern you took the part in the fight, so I need your name. Taking a look at him, Aizawa-san continued, she means your codename, kid. With a small smile, he said, Iron Man. Write it in katakana, please. The officer appeared content with it. He turned to Eraser, his expression uneasy, as the police drove off. Is it a good name? Hiro gave him a quick glance before covering his eyes with goggles. Wings emerged, and the man took to the skies, saying, Don't ask me. I'm not cut for the things like this. Izuku let out a sigh and went after Aizawa-san. It was early in the night. With a playful smirk on her lips, Midnight remarked, Those are really adorable, you know? Momo grinned subtly as she turned to face her night table. There stood 3 matryoshkas, one for her and one for her crushes. To be boyfriend and girlfriend soon. She hoped that would happen, at least. She felt ready to confess, maybe, after receiving a lot of assurances and instruction from her mistress. Heroine securing her whip said, Get ready, we're going out for a patrol. Momo noticed that Midnight and several other heroes were a little tense as they strolled through the streets of Hosu. Did they have fear of Stain? His last attack occurred more than a week ago. She wanted to avoid going on a run with a man, to be honest with herself. She was turned off by the stories alone about the hero killer and how many people he had killed. Only 3 heroes, if her memory served her well, made it through the run with him, but it ended with their carriers. She was hoping that Mei and Izuku could assist Ingenium. Apologies, she was certain of it. They displayed her prosthetic plan. That truly impressed her. Many lives could be spared from being bedridden or reliant on wheelchairs. The baby-making duo wasn't just trying to come up with ideas for the hero industry, Momo recalled. Their goal was to uphold society as a whole. She would be lying if she claimed she didn't want to take part in it because it was an admirable initiative. She could lend them her expertise and eccentricity. She would find a way to manipulate Izuku into becoming a living factory, even though he was adamantly opposed to it. Perhaps by employing a trick that her mistress had taught her. Even though she would later feel completely embarrassed. She noticed a drone flying quickly above the streets when she looked up. Next one, after that. 3 more soon after. That was strange because she had never seen them swarming until the last few days. Momo pointed to the new group of drones and said to the heroine, Midnight, look at this. All the time disregarding the woman's complaints about being called mistress. Suddenly, 2 fire trucks are speeding past them, and sirens can be heard from behind. In an attempt to obtain any information, Midnight was automatically on the move and in contact with the authorities. Heroine asked hurriedly, not even looking at her, Creata, can you make us something to travel faster? She went over the list of possible vehicles in her mind. Would an electric scooter do? Yes. Just make it quick. She stretched the front of her costume so that the handle of the car emerged first, followed quickly by the rest, and her quirky light shone brightly. Heroine took it from her and hopped on it right away, racing down the street. She made another one for her mistress and followed. Reaching Midnight, Momo asked, what is happening? The woman said to her, weaving through the traffic, there's an outgoing attack at the crossroad. Everything is on fire, because a cistern exploded. In less than a minute, they witnessed an enormous flaming wall. There were numerous fire trails at the location, and water was streaming out of the hoses in what appeared to be never-ending streams, but nothing appeared to have happened. Someone was thrown out of the fire before she could hear orders. During patrols, she occasionally came across a hero. His arms were twisted at the odd angles, and his uniform was in tatters. Momo went to him right away and took his vital signs. He was breathing heavily and had a pulse. Glancing around her, she noticed the ambulance. She yelled, medic, in an attempt to get attention. There was a terrifying roar coming from the flame curtain. She quickly turned to look at it and noticed a massive humanoid creature with exposed brain tissue and nearly black skin. Was this a Nomu? I wonder. She heard her classmates talk about the beast at the USJ and how it fought All Might so viciously. How come one of those monsters was back? Was it the work of the League of Villains? All of the current heroes started attacking the Nomu in an effort to scare the beast away from civilians and firemen. The creature, however, was unfazed by their efforts and started to swing widely. As if things couldn't get any worse, a second Nomu with wings and yellow skin appeared out of the smoke. It targeted the gullible hero. With quick thinking, Momo dodged the man's enormous talons and ran to tackle him on the ground. Hiro gave her a glance. He looked around and said, sorry for that. Did you see a kid in armor similar to the knight? At that, she furrowed her brows. Such was the suit owned by Iida-san. Was all the commotion causing him to get lost? It was not like him to do this. There was a knot in her stomach as she asked, Are you asking about Tenya Iida? Yes, him. Can you please find him? He's an intern of mine, but I've lost sight of him, the man begged her. I promise to try my hardest, she exclaimed, getting up and scurrying away from the Nomus. How on earth could she begin? Hosu was not a little man. Iida-san, though, couldn't be that far away, considering that a hero was nearby. How come he would quit his internship? Was this an additional accident? The hero would then not be present, though. She gave it some serious thought. What could possibly be more crucial than Nomu's attack? What might be present to convince her classmate not to go to the rescue? Blot. That was all her mind could come up with. The city was home to Hero Killer. Iida-san's choice of city for her internship. The city where Stain attacked his brother, leaving him permanently crippled. Her classmate wouldn't pursue such a dangerous criminal on his own. He wasn't all that dim. Above her, a drone flew. Momo stopped dead in her tracks, staring after it. About 20 of those were present, in the vicinity. She went there because something told her to. She dashed into the alley as quickly as she could. She let out a loud gasp. Beneath Iida-san, there was a small pool of blood on the ground. Beside her classmate, a man in a black suit with multiple knives holstered in the holsters, and a red scarf were standing with their sword raised. The teenager was going to be killed by the hero killer. She created a tennis ball with her hand and made a throwing motion toward the Stain. The villain must have seen the object flying toward her and leapt away. She hurried over and used her arm staff to put herself in between hero killer and her fallen classmate. She suddenly became aware that someone else was present. A hero with a shoulder wound wearing a brown robe. Stain shivered as she asked in a raspy voice, "Another fake?" His eyes were fixed on her. Iida-san yelled, "Yaoyorozu-san, why are you here?" She gave him a fleeting glance before turning back to face the villain. "The hero you're interning with told me to find you. I barely made it in time." Teen shouted, "Go away. This doesn't concern you." Momo considered her choices. Maybe she could take him and flee if it was just Iida-san. But she was unable to carry out this plan now that another hero had been killed. "Can't do. Until help arrives, I'll keep you two safe." Her classmate yelled, "It's reckless. Go away from here." Stain questioned, preparing to launch an attack, "What drives you to protect those two fakes?" She gave a tense smile. Her eyes flickered back to Izuku sharing his dream with her, and to Mei telling her about her grandfather. Her response was, "Because that's what hero does." Hero Killer gave a big smile. "Good, you may be worth keeping around." After that, he unexpectedly sprinted toward her and swung his katana in her direction. She swung her staff, timing the block so that the blade's tip struck her instead of her. She was forced to leap away as a boot with spikes flew towards her. Hero Killer was at her with his sword before she could even consider her next move. She used her peculiarity to create a metal beam that shot out of her chest and struck Stain in the stomach. The villain rolled away, then leapt back up and stabbed her with a knife. After taking it out with a perfectly timed blow, she saw Stain chasing after her once more. Momo reached out and her palm revealed a stun gun. The villain leapt up, causing her to miss when she pulled the trigger. How absurd were his reflexes, really. If she hadn't rolled away, he would have cut her to pieces with his blade. She sprang up quickly and swung her hand at Stain's face, sending sand flying. The man gave her a hiss, swung blindly at her, and then retreated. It stung just a little bit. At the back of her hand, there was a thin red line. She looked up at the hero killer, who was massaging his eyes with his arm bandage. Normally she would have tried to get close to him, but she needed time to gather her thoughts. She was starting to get tired of his constant attacks and all the running around. The villain opened his now red eye to her and remarked, "I must say, that your abilities are truly admirable. If you stay true to your declaration, then you may become a true hero." Momo furrowed her brow in response. She was unable to follow the man's conversation. He said solemnly, staring at his blade and grinning eerily to himself, "But I need to continue my mission. Those two fakes, marring the name of a hero, need to be culled." She took up arms once more and proclaimed, "I won't allow you to do it." She watched while Stain licked at the sword's tip. Her body suddenly felt an unseen force pressing on it, causing her to fall to the ground. Her staff took off from her grasp. What just transpired? She tried everything, but she was unable to even move her pinky. She heard his boots drawing near. She attempted to summon her quirk, but the use of even that was somehow prevented. Not at all. She was unable to give up. She needed to deliver them. A melody started to emanate from above them. This confused her for a moment, but then she realized what this piece was. Alan's voice came through her glasses. "Hello, Yaoyorozu-san. I hope that you're doing fine. The sound of the rockets, which was so familiar to her and made her heart skip a beat, approached and, along with 2 repellent blasts, drove Stain away from them. A metallic sound struck the concrete, and the gentle hum of machinery was audible. She was positioned in a sitting position against the wall and looked into the electric green eyes. After feeling a touch of metal on her shoulder, the faceplate parted, revealing Izuku Midoriya's cheerful countenance. He exclaimed, "Hi, Momo, missed me?" with happiness. She could only think of 2 things. Hero Killer, for one, was doomed. 2, she would give Izuku a forceful peck on the lips if she could move. All of this occurred as Izuku and Aizawa-san worked to put an end to the mugging. Suddenly, a notification appeared on the screen stating that Hero Killer had been spotted leaving the portal by drones, and that 2 League of Villains members had soon followed. He was happy that Maze and his gadget worked well for monitoring and searching. It implied that they could provide them to other cities and support the maintenance of order there. However, League's association with Stain was concerning. Were the parties able to form some sort of alliance? If so, evildoers have a formidable ally. And it had nothing to do with Hero Killer's skills alone. Without a doubt, his notoriety would entice other underground members to join the group. Drone pursued Stain after he left 2 League members and went in search of Native, a hero. His theory was validated as he watched the fight on camera. The villain's obsession was with blood and how it was consumed. The other portion, which he had obtained from the testimonies of heroes who had survived the run-in with humanity, still required verification. Then came the alert, which caused Nezu, Aizawa-san, and Izuku to swear. Iida-san's costume tracker indicated that the adolescent was getting closer to the Hero Killer's location. Even worse, the Nomu's attack prevented them from really being able to offer him a backup. Although he had never seen the beasts before, he was positive that he did not want to go on a run with them. That kind of power and versatility would be too much for his current armor to handle just yet. He waved off an idea that occurred to him. Izuku and Aizawa-san made a snap decision and took to the skies, flying in the direction of Hosu. At Night Raven's fastest speed, their estimated time of arrival was approximately 10 minutes. That was not to his taste. Iida-san challenged Stain to a duel, but the result was clear. Alan then informed him that Momo was going to close the alley. His mind was racing with panic as his heart pounded. He had no doubt that his dear friend would be able to delay Hero Killer for a short while, but not defeat her. And should the man choose to murder her? He shifts all of his power to the thrusters and accelerates, piercing the sound barrier and overtaking Aizawa-san. He hoped the man would get the joke. As he observed the battle, a wave of consolation passed through his thoughts. Momo was fending off the Stain on her own. Hardly, though, did she. Her plan to blind Hero Killer with sand was incredibly clever because it would cause his vision to remain blurry longer than a flashbang could. With less than a minute to spare, he peeked at the screen. Alan smirked and said, "Allow me to prepare a stage for you, sir." At this he arched an eyebrow, but then his earpiece began to play, "Shoot to Thrill." He gave that a sly smile. That kind of thing wasn't really appropriate at the time, but whatever. Permit the AI. Enjoy yourself. Izuku noticed them, Stain gawking around, dumbfounded by what was happening, and Native and Iida-san not faring any better. Momo, for her part, grinned and acknowledged the song. He descended from the sky and unleashed a blast from his repulsors, forcing Hero Killer to retreat deeper into the alley. As soon as he touched down on the concrete, he turned to face his friend and pressed her up against the wall. He asked joyfully, pulling his face mask open and plastering on his best smile. "Hi, Momo, missed me?" The happy look took hold of her face. "What took you so long?" she asked in a light-hearted way. With a small shrug, he got up and looked at Stain, who was observing him cautiously. "Oh, you know, air traffic and such." From the drone's speakers came Alan's voice, plus terrible sense of direction. Was his dear AI simply laughed at him? Izuku shot a quick glance at Native and Iida-san and replied, "You're my GPS, so if anything it's your fault." Asking, "Who are you?" as he readied himself for the onslaught. He said with a hint of pride, "Iron Man. You know, I speed all the way from Musutafu here to stop you." Hero Killer gave a curious little hum. The man's eyes squinted a little. "Aren't you the kid who won the sports festival?" He replied, snapping down his mask and preparing his repulsors. "Maybe. But what's more important, I think that you should give up." With a truly intimidating aura, Stain took a step forward. "And why is that?" He asked his friend, keeping his gaze fixed on the villain. "Momo, what's your blood type?" It surprised her. "Why do you ask?" The grimace that passed over Stain's features pleased him. The duration of your quirk depends from the blood type of the person, right? And if my data is correct, then A is one of the shortest one, when the paralyzes last. Hero Killer laughed and grinned broadly. Correct, kid. Now, what do you intend to do with this? With confidence, Izuku said, Stain, stall you long enough for others to get up. Then we're going to catch you. You'll answer for your crimes. Try it, boy, he exclaimed, slapping the knife at the man. After blasting it down, he saw the villain charging at him. He fired his thrusters and launched himself at the man. He lunged toward the Stain when he got close, but the punch was easily sidestepped. Hero Killer lunged at his arm with his katana, but it flew. Nevertheless, the blow's force was sufficient to knock him down, and he ultimately took a kick to the stomach. Izuku pushed Stain away by slamming his palm open and then twisting it around to strike him in the shoulder. A bola shoots out, locking on his target. Sadly, the villain leapt over it, demonstrating his absurdly fast reaction time. The blade struck him squarely in the head. With lightning speed, he punched the villain in the jaw with the sword in his left hand. Stain chose to give up and retreat, dropping a weapon into Izuku's hands. He snapped it and threw it far behind him, not wanting the Hero Killer to get it back. The villain said, "You can fight," and produced a knife. The man asked gravely, "But do you think you could do the same without that armor of yours?" Izuku mockingly said, "You think I'm going to get out of it and let you cut me to pieces?" He peeked at Momo and saw her slowly rising up, saying, "I'm quirkless kid, who wants to become a hero. I won't allow my career to end by the hands of some crazy crusader." "What motivates you to support others in this honorable vocation?" Hero Killer inquired, cautiously approaching. He honestly replied, stalling for as long as he could, "Many things, but mostly I want to prove to everyone that you don't need a quirk to help people." Standing next to him with a staff in her hand was his friend. She smiled a little at him. Iida-san cried out, getting to his feet trembling, "Enough. Why do you keep fighting? This is my revenge." Izuku asked, a little angry, "Revenge? Since when does the hero follow such a selfish thing?" He spit out, "Ingenium would be disappointed in you." Momo continued, a determined explosion of emotion visible on her face. "I agree with Izuku. We, heroes, shouldn't let emotions cloud our judgment." Stain hurried over to them and exclaimed, "Great, you both have proven that you're clear from the corruption." One of the knives was aimed at him, while the other was aimed at his friend. With his running pace, he took them on his chest, causing the blades to fall harmlessly to the ground. Hero Killer leapt to his feet and ran along the building's wall using the window sills. The antagonist lunged forward, aiming his weapon at Iida-san, but Momo deflected it. Izuku flew at Stain as he attempted to kick her, smashing them into the wall. The man gave him a hard headbutt before throwing a powerful punch that knocked him off balance. Hero Killer used it to kick him hard and push him farther away. Peering at the villain, he witnessed him evading the girl's blows. He took her down with a deft leg sweep and charged at Iida-san, who was still unsteady on his feet. Izuku hit Stain with a blast, which knocked the villain down. However, the villain seized the opportunity to roll and extended his reach. He locked onto the man's back, deciding to use his newfound baby skills. He applauded the fire shock bug. A small disc shot out from an opening in his shoulder and landed precisely where it was supposed to. Stain screamed in agony as electricity shot through his body, causing him to collapse to the ground. Iida-san took a chance and stepped in between the antagonist. Izuku exhaled, believing that the situation was resolved. He had to concede that Stain was deadly with his blows and very persistent. When you combine his eccentricity with the situation, it's unlikely that any hero that the man pursued would survive. With handcuffs protruding from her hand, Momo ran up to face her classmate. However, before she could handcuff the villain, Hero Killer lifted his head and quickly licked the teen's shoulder wound. Iida-san's body froze. Izuku let out a loud cry, "Watch out!" in an attempt to alert his friend. He couldn't fire a blast because she was in the line of sight. With a sudden upward motion, Stain flashed his hidden blade from his wristbands. The girl was startled as the man swung it, cutting her leg. Momo dropped to her knees as the villain licked the blood off the knife, dodging a wild swipe from the staff. Hero Killer leapt back at the last moment, taking both teens with him as Izuku flew towards them. Stain pointed two blades at his hostages before he could rash again, and the terrifying aura grew stronger until it was completely overwhelming. The villain exclaimed, "Stay back, not taking any chances." The man gave the order, "Or this too are going to die. Keep your hands down." He had to stifle the urge to raise his hands. He clenched his teeth. Why had it to proceed in this manner? With a serious voice, Stain cautioned him, don't even consider using other gadgets. Unless you want to try yourself against my reflexes. Izuku tried to talk sense into man's head, saying, let them be. Even if you hurt them, you won't be able to escape. My drones will follow you. He could not let the villain murder the teenagers. Particularly Momo. Though it was wrong to consider her more significant than Iida-san, his feelings were getting the better of him. Hero Killer slowly raised his arms and said, let those fakes come after me. More will be cold. They're going to make a fine offering to the society. He countered, trying to stall as long as possible, and what great it will do. People are already scared of you. Heroes are starting to hunt you. Even if you somehow escape, you won't last long. Someone needs to be dyed in blood. The title of a hero is given away left and right to anyone with strong quirk. Most of the heroes are out there just for the money and fame. They make me sick. Stain spit out those who were worse. He reached his zenith with Momo. Even if the girl has a right heart, I'll not hesitate to sacrifice her to continue my mission. His chest boiled with wrath. His eyes flickered to an image of the girl's body being impaled by the villain's weapon. Izuku cried out, don't. Stain gave a menacing grin. Let's test something. Prove to me that you're a worthy person. Choose, Iron Man. Whom will be saved? A fake or a hero? Hero Killer started to lower his arm, and time seemed to slow down. Though his mind offered him alternatives, Izuku was unable to aim his repulsor quickly enough and no device could deploy quickly enough. He cast a quick look at Momo. Her look betrayed a mixture of fear, pleading for assistance, and regret. His chest tightened in an instant, and he let out a scream of agony. He felt the force of a strong repulsor blast pressing up against his body from his chest piece. He held onto it for a few moments that felt like hours. Disabling the electricity, he stared at the Hero Killer. His face took on a horrified expression upon discovering a large, smoking hole in the center of the man's chest. Through it, one could see a cracked wall. He opened his face mask and attempted to form a sentence. A simple word would do, but his throat was tight and his mind was blank. Stain had let go of the knives, which fell to the ground unharmed. Hero Killer gave Izuku a soft smile while coughing up some blood. Man uttered loudly in a whisper, at last. A true hero does what's needed to be done, and then his body collapsed onto the concrete. His weight caused his knees to buckle. He killed a human being just now. Human, but a human doing many terrible things to other people in a pending society. A vomit burst through his lips as something emerged from his stomach. His thoughts were racing through his head at the speed of light. Was he now regarded as a criminal? Is he going to jail? Was his career as a hero over before it even got started? After finding out that he killed a man, what would his mother say? How about Momo and Mei? Were they to despise him? A fear of him? He found it intolerable. He was forced to look up when someone grabbed him by the shoulders. The face of Midnight appeared before his eyes. He couldn't hear her, but she was speaking to him. There was lightness in his head. The woman took a moment to turn around. Iida-san soon arrived and assisted the heroine in pulling him up. As they made their way to the alley entrance, Team gave him support. With a worried look on her face, Momo suddenly materialized in front of him and began speaking with him. However, her words were inaudible to him. More heroes appeared. Normally he would have known them, but at the moment he was only familiar with Endeavor's flaming beard. They snapped their gazes up before they could say anything. He forced his head to see what looked like a strange flying creature. It was driven up against the asphalt out of the blue. He saw a flash of wings that he recognized. He was taken by Momo and Iida-san to the side and made his own on the sidewalk. He had horrible thoughts running through his head. He felt his helmet being yanked off and something gentle brushing against his face. Peeking at the girl, he saw that she was kneeling in front of him, tears pouring from her deep-set eyes. Izuku. She uttered in a barely perceptible whisper, "Are you all right?" No, he wasn't. There was still a sense of horror and dread. He buried his head into her hair as he moved his arms to pull his friend into a tight embrace. Iida-san said, grabbing his attention, "Midoriya-san." Teen tried to speak but was unable. I'm so sorry. If I wasn't so blinded by my rage. Boy just let out a loud cry. Aizawa-san approached them with a serious expression. The man knelt beside him and rested a hand on his shoulder. He was about to speak, but he quickly shut it and shook his head. He gave Izuku a look that made it clear that Eraserhead was attempting to console him. For him, the remainder was a blur. He was taken by ambulance to the hospital. Alan entered the room, activated the emergency protocol, and his armor collapsed to the ground. The nurse placed him on the bed and covered him with a blankie. He had no idea how long he had been sitting by himself, watching the dying stain. Momo entered with her wounds neatly bandaged. Girl gave him a tight hug right away. She remained silent. She petted his hair while she sat there. She assured him that everything would work out. He really wanted to believe it. A short while later, the room's door banged open, and Mei emerged from the entrance, panting. She moved quickly, as if she were leaping at them, her arms slipping around them like a vice. Izuku did everything in his power to stay awake. He was afraid that the stain would awaken in a dream and reveal to him what a monster he had turned into. However, he was worn out. Not literally, but mentally, he had had enough. His eyes closed, adding that to the warmth that radiated from the girls. His final wish was to wake up free of handcuffs around his wrists. There was a silver lining to the circumstances, as usual. Nezu preferred to believe that bonuses would always be more important. The society would be at peace, heroes could breathe, and a lot of current and potential criminals would be deterred if the hero killer was eliminated. Sadly, there was but in that situation, a grave one. His student's mental health was in jeopardy. An almost natural scowl appeared on his features after his earlier conversation with Aizawa-san. Even though Midoriya was still shaken from the accident, he hardly spoke. Not even two girls, who were by his side all the time, could get a sentence out of him. Young Hatsume claimed that he wasn't in the mood for food and drink, so the teen abstained from both. For the boy, at least, it was a quiet night. Nezu met Tsuragame-san, Aizawa-san, and All Might at the hospital first thing in the morning. Together with Sir Night-Eye, his former sidekick, and young Tagata, his successor, number 1 hero appeared in skeleton form. Although the two's presence startled him a little, he was confident that everything would work out for the best in the end. He did his best not to frown as he entered the room. The boy's reaction conveyed how much this was bothering him in just one glance. Young Midoriya was paler than a wall, with large bags under his eyes and a vacant expression on his face. How could he not feel sorry for his student? He gave a gentle smile, peering at the girls who were at the teen's sides, tightly hugging him. Boy was not alone, at least. Young Yaoyorozu, young Hatsume, could you please leave us for a moment? We would like to talk to young Midoriya, he said politely. After hesitating for a while, they eventually complied and left the room, casting worried looks at the boy. They had to perform that well. They could easily make the already precarious mental state of the teen worse. Thus, if anything. Yagi-san approached the student and inquired, "How are you feeling, young Midoriya?" The boy in question continued to stare at the floor while huddled into the blankets and cutting himself off from the outside world. Nezu was tempted to grimace. One of the things you don't ask someone who is struggling with the idea of ending a life is that. Not this early, anyway. He saw young Tagata, who was probably going to lighten the mood with a joke, being glared at by Aizawa-san. With a silent sigh, he took a step forward. "Young Midoriya." The student made a slight movement. "There is someone who I would like you to meet." The man gave a slight bow and said, "I'm the chief of police in Hosu, Kenji Tsuragame. Woof. It's nice to meet you, although I wish that the circumstances were better, woof." Teen hesitated to say anything for a few seconds before opening his mouth. Boy said in a raspy voice, "Are you going to arrest me?" That did not surprise Nezu. It made sense to inquire about it. Nevertheless, the query only made him feel more sorry for the teenager. He said firmly, "No, we came to talk to you about this whole situation." Young Midoriya's face was shocked, with a look of complete disbelief tinged with a tiny bit of relief. The student made a feeble, "I've killed a man," comment. Tsuragame-san spoke in a comforting tone. "From the testimony given by pro-hero native and 2 interns, Creata and Ingenium, we know that there was no other option, woof." Teen let the words settle in his mind for a short while, working his jaw. With a grave tone, he said, "I see. Still, doesn't that make me a killer?" Kneeling in front of the boy, Aizawa-san asked, "Midoriya, do you know who the killer is?" Student looked at the hero and simply shook his head. The killer is someone who takes away lives and doesn't feel remorseful for it. Now, do you feel bad for what have happened? Saddened. Even more so if it was to protect Momo and Iida-san. Young Midoriya started crying. I've tried to think of something. To find a gadget in my S-suit, that W would help me. But their W was none, that could deploy fast enough. Aizawa-san said gravely, grabbing the attention of the guard boy, "Then you're not a killer. You are a hero here, Midoriya." Catching the teen's attention, Yagi-san stated, "I agree with Aizawa-kun." All Might sounded like he was lost in thought when he said, "In my carrier, there were times when killing the villain was the only option to save people. Eraserhead scratched his head and said, I also have a few thugs on my account. I had to shoot 2 people during my police career, woof, Tsuragame-san said, looking at his hands. With his customary smile missing, young Tagata admitted, I may not have taken away a life, but I'd put one criminal on the wheelchair for the rest of his life. Nezu continued to stare at his pupil, whose eyes darted around the space while he held his mouth open. He knew exactly what was going through the boy's mind. The teen asked, pleading for assistance in a weak voice, How do you get over it? Yagi-san was about to respond to that, but Aizawa-san got there first. Hiro shrugged and remarked, You don't? Eraser looked deeply into the young Midoriya's eyes and said, You have to embrace it and deal with it on a daily basis. But don't do it alone. Have people around you, who are ready to help you. It makes it easier. Teen, deep in thought, bit his lip and furrowed his brow. At last, he raised his head to look directly into everyone's eyes and gave a nod of understanding. That waved over him was a great relief. Nezu would ask Hound Dog to visit the boy and see how he was doing, just in case. He pushed the police chief to continue, saying, There is also another reason why we came here. Tsuragame-san nodded and took out a notepad. Yes, woof. We still need your statement, but it doesn't have to be now. What's more important is agreeing on the version we're going to give to public, woof. Playing with his fingers, young Midoriya naively suggested, Can we just tell that Stain was caught? Aizawa-san said bluntly, Can't do. Media somehow got the info about Hero Killer's death. Yagi-san hurriedly added, But they don't know who did this, in an attempt to prevent the students from becoming unduly concerned about the circumstance. Nezu reported, feeling conflicted about it, that they did. We've tried to give the credit to Endeavor, but he outright said no. The idea of covering for the teen seemed to completely elude the man. The police chief said, flipping through the pages, that an Endeavor couldn't do that kind of damage to Stain, woof. The best possible thing, if you want to distance yourself from the case, is to say to media, that hero, who did this, doesn't wish to reveal his identity. At this, young Midoriya furrowed his brow. Would they buy it? He questioned, clearly doubting himself. Aizawa-san reassured, vultures would fuss about it, but eventually, they're going to give up. I understand. Then, kindly, proceed. The student sighed slightly. After a moment of staring, Sir Night-Eye moved closer to the boy and held out his hand. I've heard from Principal about your analytical mind. If you ever want to get more hero experience, then my agency's door are open for you. Hiro said with a slight grin. Teen shook the man's hand and gave him a grateful look. Nezu saw the fleeting surprise on Sir's face at that moment. Without a doubt, the hero took advantage of the boy's quirk. Later on, he would have to question him about the vision. He hoped it turned out well. Mei was at a loss for what to think. She is happy with Puppy's new physique as she strolls back to the hotel from her internship, but the next moment she receives a call from the principal informing her that Izuku is hospitalized after running with the hero killer. She knew immediately who this guy was, but she didn't want to hear that her boyfriend was being taken to the place where people go when bad things happen to them. For her, it was an obvious choice, internship or not. She ran to the train station right away and boarded the bullet train to Hosu. She couldn't stop pictures from running through her mind. Izuku, barely alive and missing a limb or two, was hooked up to a lot of machines. She had to get over her addiction to cheap horror flicks. Sincerely, she considered approaching the machinists, taking them completely out of commission, and forcing the train to travel at top speed. Merely to move more quickly there. She was able to locate the hospital where Izuku was staying by getting in touch with Alan. It was also mentioned to her that Momo and her boyfriend were present. Fantastic. More concerns, okay. She'd deal with it all at once. However, if her priceless people suffered harm, then God help that hero killer. In the lobby, she noticed Vixen and the hobo caterpillar. Izuku and Momo were being interns for those two, right? Heroes led her to the room of her boyfriend and said, try to help him. That should irritate her. She would make an effort. Either she would succeed or her name wouldn't be Mei Hatsume. Which, in case anyone was unaware, it was. She pushed the door aside so she could see them. Momo gave her boyfriend a tight hug, stroked his hair, and grinned a little. And Izuku, his green eyes and the way he stared at her, broke her heart. He appeared so tiny and terrified. Simply put, it wasn't right. She ran up to give them a firm embrace. Her boyfriend needed her right now, so she decided to ask questions later. As well as her closest friend. Although the girl wasn't expressing it, Mei sensed that Momo needed consolation as well. She smiled when she woke up the next day, realizing how intertwined they were. A smile that vanished quickly when Izuku refused to eat. Not even water was on his mind. After her partner demonstrated the value of eating well and staying hydrated, she even understood it for herself. After the 10th try, she and Momo gave up trying to get him to at least take a few bites. Rather, they stayed near him, holding his hands, fiddling with his hair, and doing anything they could to encourage him. Mei felt oddly thankful when her friend kissed Izuku on the temple. She had read on the internet that you should usually show other girls where they belong when they get too mushy with your boyfriend. But here, with Momo, she felt comfortable. In addition, she had a queasy feeling in her stomach that told her to be grateful, so she did. Mei wanted to argue when the principal arrived with the other boys and asked them to leave for a while. How could she leave her boyfriend, who was in pain over a verbal altercation? However, she gave in. She believed that the principal wouldn't take any action to make Izuku's condition worse. She hoped that he had a ridden wool if he did. With their backs to the wall, they stood close to the door and stared out the window at the city. She sensed Momo approaching her and putting his hand on hers. Peering at the girl, she noticed that she was lost in thought. She squeezed the girl's palm and waited for her to express her thoughts. Her friend asked in a doubtful voice, Do you know what exactly have happened? Mei shook her head and turned to face the girl. No idea. Principal called me and said that Izuku is in the hospital after confrontation with Hero Killer. Momo said, I see. After a brief period of silence. There was. She let out a loud sigh. Izuku killed Stain. Her mind would derail if it were a speeding train. Her charming, intelligent, attractive, and curly-haired boyfriend, Izuku, killed a man. That joke lacked humor. That was necessary. She looked at her friend, but the girl's expression made it clear that she was taking this very seriously. Mei slightly parted her lips a couple of times before she spoke. What happened? Momo bit her lip for a few seconds, causing an awkward silence to descend between them. She groaned as she swallowed. I will only say what's important. Me and my classmate were taken hostage by Hero Killer. He threatened to kill us and Izuku. Izuku used that powerful beam from Suit's chest piece. Izuku killed Stain to save us, to save me. When the girl began to cry, Mei gave her a big hug. Was her friend born under a bad star sign? She had already experienced 4 near misses in the short 3 months since the start of high school. However, she felt oddly relieved that Izuku took the actions he did. That's why Momo was secure. Even on its own, the prospect of losing either of them was awful and terrifying. Now, she sincerely hoped they would be able to enjoy some quiet time. If not, Mei was prepared to shut the two in her room and spend time cuddling with them. They remained that way for some time, only breaking up when the principal and other people left. Snatching the girl's hand, they returned to the room. Even though Izuku was still terrified and broken, at least he had some light in his eyes now. It would have to stay that way for her. They just joined him on the bed and held each other tightly without saying anything. That is, until Momo withdrew and turned to face her lap. Mei arched a brow in response. The girl gave off the impression that she wanted to tell them something but was unsure. Her friend sighed deeply and looked at them hesitantly after a moment. Momo's expression was determined as she said, I want to tell you something, and I know that circumstances could be better, but I just want to have it out of my chest. I love you, both of you. Mei gave a blink. Her stomach was exploding, her heart was racing, and she could see a tiny picture of herself performing a victory dance in her head. A small voice in the back of her mind warned her that this was strange, but she chose to ignore it. Playing with her hands, the girl continued her confession. I don't know when it all begun, but for the long time I was having that strange, happy feeling inside my heart, whenever I'm close to either of you. Just recently I was aware of it. I honestly love both of you. Suddenly she shifted her gaze. Momo sounded really hurt at that thought, but I understand if you don't harbor the feelings to me. Izuku looked at them and moved a little before Mei could say anything. I also want to say something. For a while, I was having a swirl of emotions. Me and Mei started dating during the second week of school, and I was content with it. He cracked up. I mean, why wouldn't I? Finally, after dealing with abuse for having a birth defect, there was someone who loved me just for being me, and it wasn't my mom. Her lover sighed. But soon after it, I've started developing emotions to you, Momo. I knew what they meant and I was unsure of what to do. I also love both of you, he acknowledged, staring at his lap. A double victory. To avoid awkwardness, they were already close and in love with one another. Looking at everything at once, she saw all of those times they had spent together. By now, it seemed like they had been dating for more than a month. However, Why were those two acting as though the world was ending? It's time to make the necessary repairs. She smiled at them, making the two look confused as she laughed to herself. Calmly, she said to them, "You're both silly." She leaned forward and kissed Momo on the lips. She caught her now girlfriend giving a startled little squeak. Compared to kissing Izuku, it felt completely different, which she thought was a good idea. Her heart proved her right as it beat faster. That kiss was made even better by the addition of something fruity. Glancing back, she saw her boyfriend's slack jaw and red-faced girlfriend. Glancing at him, she pointed to the girl. "What are you waiting for? It's your turn." They looked at one another and drew closer. They seemed very shy to kiss each other, as if they were afraid they would scare each other. However, they appeared to be enjoying it, particularly with all the humming coming out of Momo's throat. Izuku licked his lips and peeked at their girlfriend as they ended and leaned back, with a whisper, "Peach. You taste like a peach." She laughed a little, and then burst out laughing. They both jumped at the chance to join her in this. She was astounded by the girl. They all ended up embracing once more somehow. Glancing over at her boyfriend, she noticed a broad smile on his face. Good to see that he was returning to his normal self, if slowly. She gave them a bright smile as she pulled back a little. With delight, she said, "I love you both." Momo continued to stare at her room's ceiling, occasionally letting out a contented sigh. That's how it felt to be in love and have your feelings reciprocated. Then, she could really get enough of this. How could she have gone so long without experiencing that? Positively, this was going to be her life going forward, even though she didn't really know. Taking her phone, she checked her chat messages from her girlfriend and boyfriend. She would grow accustomed to referring to Izuku and Mei in this way, even though it was still a little strange to her. Examining the most recent messages, she reaffirmed that this was not a dream. They decided to go on a date tomorrow, all three of them. Her official debut date. Not merely some meeting she had to go to. Play nice with some pretentious kid who was more into her body than her character. It goes without saying that she was overjoyed. She was only irritated by Izuku and his mental condition. It was a huge relief when he appeared to improve after they had confessed to one another yesterday. However, he was still filled with fear. She looked closely at him and saw that he avoided looking at anyone but her and Mei. He flinched every time Stain was brought up, shrinking to the smallest possible size. That would not be the same with her. She thought it her responsibility to stand by him now that she was his official girlfriend. She was going to do it anyhow, but this time it seemed even more crucial. In addition, she missed his beaming grin. She was planning to do something else as well. She would adhere strictly to the motto of her school. She was going to go all out to become the greatest heroine she could be, so that a circumstance akin to the one involving Stain would never occur again. She gave a nod, assuring herself that she wasn't kidding. It was now Momo Yaoyorozu's turn to act like any other typical teenage girl and go through her closet looking for the perfect outfit for the date, worrying more than she needed to. Mei was never one to consider things carefully. She just completed them, hoping for the best result possible. She demonstrated her point by kissing Momo, showing that the girl's fear was unfounded. She ought to have felt guilty for not recognizing her flirting with her current girlfriend. Really, she ought to be able to tell at first glance given how much she has read about dating and love. Perhaps she did, but she was unaware of it. Whatever the case, she now had a lovely and intelligent girlfriend on top of a handsome and intelligent boyfriend. She was overwhelmed with luck. However, she didn't. Mei was, if anything, furious. Furious with herself. She probably didn't hate being the inventor until then. As she was contentedly playing with her newborn, her loved ones were battling to survive against the insane murderer. The outcome? Momo experienced her fourth near-death experience, and Izuku was in complete mental collapse. What was wrong with her? She was ashamed of herself. She recalled a time when her grandfather was still living. She had asked him once before about killing other people, but she had since forgotten the reason. Even though he was a hero, he assured her he would sacrifice himself to save another person. Back then, she didn't comprehend what he was saying. She was still having trouble wrapping her mind around it. Mei groaned in irritation and gave her head a fierce scratch. She was going to get a terrible headache from all that thinking. Her mother called from downstairs. "Mei, you want to come and watch the video from yours cousin's competition?" She hoped that by saying, "coming," she would be able to relax. She sat down between her parents and watched the video of the archery competition. Not long after, she spotted Mie, her beloved cousin with pink hair. Did her mother's side of the family have a strange custom whereby all girls' names began with M? It was only natural that she liked that cousin. They shared similar quirks and personalities. Her interest in the video was hazy at best. She was still thinking about how brave her girlfriend and boyfriend were. She was a little disappointed that she was unable to help them in any way. Something absurd sort of slipped her mind. Be a hero and keep them safe. It was foolish. She was clueless about fighting. How on earth could she do this? Glancing up at the screen, she saw Mie pulling on an arrow that was soon released and struck the target shield's center. This also applied to the other 4 projectiles. Mei blinked in response. She was unaware of her cousin's exceptional archery skills. She recalled that Mie had once aspired to be a hero, but that she had given up because of certain students at her school. Shame, the girl would be a fierce hero, taking out criminals from a distance and stepping in for other brave heroes on the battlefield. She let out a loud gasp that hurt her parents, not that she gave a damn. Mei Hatsume has the greatest idea of her life right now. Izuku placed the bouquet he purchased next to the headstone. He had to see Stan after all. His last visit here was prior to the sports festival, which gave his mount a bad taste. Hello Stan, I apologize for not being here sooner. I was busy with school and stuff. He paused to gather his thoughts. He smiled and said, some things have happened. I actually won the festival. Izuku paused for a moment, licking his lips, then said, and beat the shit out of the blonde menace. He deserved it. He hurt Momo badly, twice. He bit his cheek hard, regretting what he had done. I've killed a man, Stan. He was a bad guy, who took lives of others, but that still doesn't justify it. But he was going to kill Momo and I just couldn't think about anything else, but using chest piece repulsor. Oh, here's something that's not grim. Momo is my girlfriend now. Mine and Mei, and before you start comparing me to Tony, no, it's not a harem and I'm not a playboy. It's just that I love them both and they love me and each other, so, yeah. We're together now. A tiny smile appeared on the lips. He was ecstatic about the turn of events. It was over, though he didn't understand why they'd all danced around the topic for so long. All he could hope for was to be a good boyfriend to them. Walking home, Izuku patted the gravestone. After telling his mother about the stain, he was relieved that she wasn't afraid of him. He was afraid that he would frighten her, but that was a foolish thought. One that instantly disappeared as she leapt into a close embrace and sobbed aloud about how happy she is that he's safe. She told him she was proud of him even though he had done such a terrible thing. He was happy that he had saved 2 lives. That gave him some relief. He heard a TV as he crept into the apartment. A woman had made a statement of some sort. While I don't know who did this, I'm glad that hero killer paid for his crimes. My husband was one of the heroes killed by this monster, leaving me and kids behind. So in the name of my family, and many others, who lost their loved ones, I want to thank the hero, who did this. Thank you for avenging the dead and please, keep guarding us. Uncertain about what to think, he just stared at the screen. Here he was, struggling with the guilt of killing another man and getting paid for it. He had a bad taste in his mouth afterward. Glancing again at the TV, he saw a reporter telling the public about the harm that Nomus had caused. Yes, those creatures. Even just watching them on the camera feed made him nervous. He recalled that Nezu had briefly informed him about those animals. How could someone treat another human in such a way? Turning them into killer machines with no consciousness. For what reason? The thought from 2 days ago reappeared out of nowhere. He went to his room, turned off his computer, and settled into his chair. He said, snapping his fingers, Alan? Yes, sir? His lips curled into a small smile as he said, open a new project file. Codename NIMSO. It was Izuku Midoriya's moment to shine. With almost complete inattention, Shota rested his head on Hisashi's lap and stroked their apartment's fluffiest cat. He considered Midoriya. Now that he had Night Raven, he really took a liking to the child. Which he was not at all pleased with. Nope. Nua. It was simply an efficient means of transportation and catching criminals who weren't paying attention. Shota tried to scowl deeply, but Hisashi's tender touch made it difficult. With a sigh, he hoped that Midoriya would handle the situation. It would be unfortunate to lose a hero with such promise before the start of his official career. I'm back. Narumi exclaimed as she firmly shut the door. With pleasure, Hisashi said, welcome back. She gave Blonde a passionate kiss as soon as she entered the room. Then she knelt to face him. She gave him a charming smile and leaned in just a few centimeters to kiss him. Hey, Shota. A worried woman asked, how's Midoriya? He shrugged and said, don't know. Hopefully Yaoyorozu and Hatsume can get him back on his feet. Oh, that reminds me. Narumi grinned broadly at them. She sounded really pleased with herself when she said, I found another polyamorous relationship. That gave Shota the chills. Nothing could go wrong here. He also had the impression that he would be the one to cause this. Excited by the news, Hizashi exclaimed, "Seriously? Who?" She yelled, "Genius boy, Hatsume and Momo." She exclaimed, bouncing up and down, "And guess what? They're just like us." "No way." She raised 3 fingers and said, "Yes way, my cute, little apprentice, Momo is similar to me. She's still rough around the edges, but she'll come by." A single finger dropped. Another digit was hidden. "Then there's that Hatsume girl, who's loud and positively crazy about everything like you, Zashi." Nezumi then gestured toward him. "And finally our genius boy. From what Momo told me, he's just like Shota. Minus the whole grumpy part." The remainder of the talk between his spouse and his wife was muffled in his mind. This was a complete catastrophe. Who, among all cats on the planet, permitted 3 troublesome children to form a bond with one another? Wait, there was a girl who could create practically anything, another girl who was a mad scientist and didn't understand the importance of safety precautions, and a boy who changed some of the fundamental laws of physics. He pulled out his cell phone, dialed the number, and made the call. "Vlad, are you still looking for a drinking buddy?" Shota Aizawa intended to submerge himself entirely in vodka. Momo's thoughts attenuated the noise in her classroom. She sighed quietly and contentedly. She felt the date went really well. Considering that Mei and Izuku were wearing jeans and flannel shirts and she was wearing a pink blouse, skirt, and black stockings, she wasn't overdressed. They reunited, kissed each other, and hauled her to the arcade. She was even more excited because she had never been in one. She entered the competition that her boyfriend and girlfriend were in, even though she had no idea how. She was determined not to give them the impression that she was weak. Just before the finish line, her pink car passed them, and their shocked expressions were priceless. Oh, and from the looks of things, she rose to the position of queen in the cunning game known as DDR. The game was simple, so she didn't really understand their problem. Simply click the arrows when the time is right to finish. Perhaps the dance classes she had to attend due to her parents' insistence helped her a little. Following that, they strolled through the city and conversed about everything and nothing at all, making a quick stop at the food court to get something to eat. Izuku's still unstable mental state was the only thing that derailed their date. He still averted people's eyes. She kissed him on the cheek and rubbed her thumb against his hand in response. That she could have this kind of effect on him seemed to do the trick, relieving his concerns and making her happy. They located a serene park and took a seat on the vacant bench. Mei's head was resting on her lap, and Izuku rested his head on her shoulder. She was in the center. They all smiled softly as she stroked their silky hair. She had a slight desire for their relationship to last forever, soaking up the evening light and spending quality time together. Sadly, they had to go back to their houses. However, the prize for consolidation was a kiss. Recalling the sensation of their mouths on hers, she bit a lip. The sparks were like electrical current running through her body. They let out those gentle hums of pleasure from their throats. She was obsessed with it. Perhaps she would give some of the things Midnight had told her a try in the future. That is, once she was positive she wouldn't pass away from shame. Su-chan pulled her from her little bubble and asked, "Ya Momo? You okay there?" Momo sat up, blinking. "Yes, why you ask?" "We've been trying to reach you for a minute or two," Kyoka-chan said, giving her an odd look. She said sheepishly, "Oh, sorry. I had something on my mind." She was still a teenager, so pardon her even though she was a hero in training. Toru-chan, her clothes bouncing with her movements, said, "Hey, when Hero Killer attacked, you were there, right? We've asked Iida, but he won't say a word, so, can you tell us, who killed him?" The entire class was engaged by the innocent question, which was asked out of pure curiosity. Everybody was staring at her, anticipating her response. "Sorry, but I can't tell you. Hero, who did it, wanted us to keep it quiet." Partially accurate. She would not disclose it to anyone, even if Izuku didn't want it. It didn't sit well with her to think about her boyfriend being battered by all the questions. Kirishima-san nodded to himself and said, "Shame. He must be really manly to do it, though." Although she wouldn't put it that way, let's accept it. She felt that there was something manly and appropriate about Izuku. With a small shudder, Ochako-chan inquired, "Anyway, how was Midnight? I hope she wasn't too extreme with you." Momo gave a small smile. "No, not at all. Internship with her was surprisingly good. I'm glad that I followed with Izuku's advice." "Izuku?" Mina-chan asked, brow wriggling and teasingly grinning at her. "He's your boyfriend or something?" There was a brief moment of embarrassment and panic, but she quickly subdued them. She placed her head on her palm and rested her elbow on the desk, recalling something Midnight had taught her. Shutting her eyes tightly and assuming a ferocious grin, she responded with a seductive tone. And what if he is jealous? She was astounded by her friends' confused expressions. They had no idea she was capable of acting in this way. She didn't either, until Midnight taught her how, but the heroine insisted that she was an expert at it. Well, perhaps she was. It felt good, somehow, to behave in this way. Before anyone could ask a question, the principal entered through the open door. As always, there was a tiny, gentle smile on his face. He said, "Students, please sit down," in a kind way. A moment later, he went on. "I'm covering for Aizawa-san for your morning lesson. He will join you later, during your hero training." Nezu-san glanced at them. "Looks like everyone is here." Kirishima-san gave a salute. The boy said, "Principal, Bakugo is missing," with concern. The principal gave a nod in response. Murmurs rose at that. About that. Katsuki Bakugo won't be a part of 1A anymore. He may still have a chance to come back, but that all depends from the potential improvement in his behavior. At the news, Momo allowed herself a smile. In fact, she was relieved that Bakugo had been removed from the hero department. She didn't think he was a hero material. He was, if anything, a bully with a strong eccentricity and enormous ego. He also injured her cute boyfriend. It was a metaphorical bucket of cold water that did him justice. Present Mike's lesson was a strange one. Man was happier than usual, chatting them up in a somewhat meaningless way. In addition, she sensed an odd sensation that he occasionally kept turning to face her and grinning appreciatively. She was unsure of the possible reason. The woman who was Midnight's subject then appeared and scared the living hell out of Momo. Heroine had an odd aura surrounding her and a big silly smile on her face that would not go away. The woman said, "Yaoyorozu, please come and hand out class quizzes," while displaying the pile of papers. She stood up and said, "Of course, Midnight Sensei." Heroine wiggled her finger. That's not how you're supposed to refer to me." No, she wouldn't. Would she? Momo gulped loudly as everyone looked at her. She gave a feeble but internship is over, protest. In a sing-song voice, she replied, "But your apprenticeship isn't." She was certain that the woman was evil. The worst thing about it, too, there would be no end to it if she didn't do it. Farewell to her honor. "Yes, mistress," she replied, flushed. She made an effort to ignore her classmates' clamor, particularly from Mineta and Mina-chan. This was more than she was ready for. Stupid Midnight, with her obsession with dominoes, or something. When the bell rang, she fled the classroom because she didn't want to respond to any questions from her classmates. It was her pleasure that lunchtime had arrived. As soon as she saw Mei and Izuku, she grabbed them and drew away from the throng in the direction of the support studio. She informed them of the events. She was a little offended by their laughter at her suffering, but kisses and hugs soon put a stop to that and lifted her spirits. Given that she had to ignore the girls' questions and teasing while putting on the costume, it was obviously a quick fix. She was going to get her sweet revenge on the woman. The training for today was a rescue race on the heavily industrialized field Gamma. Momo cast a quick glance at her classmates, mentally noting who would thrive and who would struggle with exercise. Zero-san appeared to be the most likely winner. The teenager had already shown that he could be crafty with his peculiarity. They all turned to look around when they heard the sound of engines. What they saw was a strange sight. Wrapped in his yellow sleeping bag, Aizawa-sensei is flying through the skies on some sort of winged jetpack. He resembled a butterfly almost. A terrifying butterfly that would frighten her in her dreams. With wings that folded into the jetpack, man landed gracefully next to the dumbfounded All Might. His goggles rose up as a hand emerged from his bag. His expression was as deadpan as usual as he stared at them. A few seconds later, he took out a juice box and finished it all at once, exhaling in satisfaction. He blinked at them, digesting all of this. As if nothing strange had just happened, Aizawa-sensei asked, "What are you all staring at?" Not one of them had the courage to inquire. Alan said, "That was a pure gold." She had to cover her mouth to contain her laughter. After throwing the teenager over his shoulder for, the 20th time, Izuku helped Shinso-kun to his feet. Or something similar. He was happy, nevertheless, that his friend had contacted him and requested a sparring session, stating that he wished to improve. How was he going to refuse Shinso-kun? When it came to receiving treatment from society, they were remarkably similar. He was also the only male friend he had made thus far. They were joined by Momo, who said she wanted to practice some of the moves that Midnight had taught her. He didn't want to be in the receiving end of those dirty moves. However, because there were only 3 of them, they had to alternate between one another so that each person could engage in some fighting. And then there was May. When his girlfriend produced a bow and arrows that she had made thanks to the 3D printers operating all weekend, courtesy of contacting Alan, he was completely taken aback. He watched her as he attempted to fire from it at the target shield at a distance of 10 meters. She started to become interested in archery when, though there had been no positive outcome thus far, he could not help but smile at May's seemingly odd motivation. They took a break after training for an hour. Girls went to get drinks for them. Izuku sat down next to Shinso-kun during the wait. He was still processing everything that had happened with Stain. Especially the final words of Men. Was he a real hero after all? Not that he felt like one. Shinso-kun said, "Hey." To get his attention. Teen scratched his head and peered shyly at him. Teen sighed loudly, if there is something you want to talk about, I mean. We're friend, right? So, With a slight smile, Izuku said, "I know. Thanks." The boy was kind enough to notice his discomfort and extend assistance. He might be able to tell him what's bothering him later on, but not right now. It was simply too raw. "Alright, may I ask you a question?" timidly asked Shinso-kun. He laughed a little and said, "You just did." Teen seemed genuinely interested in it, saying, "Yeah. So, how is it? I mean using that suit of yours and flying around." He looked up, humming. "It's great really. Wind is whistling around you. You cut through the air at high speed, sometimes you feel that there is like nothing in the world except you and that freedom," he responded with honesty. Shinso-kun remarked in a dreamy voice, "Must be nice." Glancing over at the teenager, he asked with a gentle smile, "Would you like to try someday?" Before an answer could be given, girls came back carrying drinks. Izuku noticed that the boy was considering his proposal as he cast a glance at his friend. He was hoping for a quick and encouraging response. Peering at May, he couldn't help but sense that something odd was happening to her. Although she appeared to be carrying less excitement each day, he could still see it in her. He observed that Momo had also realized that fact. "May, are you okay?" he worriedly questioned. She blinked as she glanced up at him. "Yeah." Momo said, lightly scowling, "You've been acting a bit weird." Their girlfriend tilted her head and asked, "Have I?" She muttered aloud, Maybe this has to do something with this." Shinso-kun said, "This?" out loud. "Yup. Lately, whenever I use my quirk for longer periods of time, I get that feeling, like I'm more in the control of my body than usual. And my mind is somehow clearer." May continued, pointing to her eyes. That was thought-provoking. His mind had already started to look for potential answers. It was not unheard of for people's mental states to begin to shift after using their quirks for a while. It was temporary in some cases and permanent in others. It appeared to be the girl's backup plan. Momo looked at him quizzically and asked, "Could it be that perhaps there is a change in the chemistry inside her body?" He slowly nodded. He looked at May, who was roving with her eyes between them, and said, "It's possible. We could visit Recovery Girl later to confirm that." Girl thought for a moment, then gave them a nod. Pointing at the weapon, Shinso-kun questioned, "What's with the bow? You want to take up Kyudo?" "Nope." Her broad smile said, "It's so I can be a hero." Izuku and Momo cast wide gazes at their girlfriend. May never stated that she wished to be one. Indeed, her grandfather was one, and children typically say such things when they're young. But a committed inventor suddenly declaring her desire to switch careers. "You don't want to be an engineer anymore?" he inquired, expressing sadness at the thought. She angrily shook her head. She seemed a little offended by his inquiries, saying, "I'm still making babies." Her tone darkened. "It's just, seeing what happened lately, I was pissed at myself. You two were risking your lives and I was away, sitting safely at the lab. I want to change that. But I can't really fight. So after watching my cousin's archery competition, I thought that this may be a way for me to support you too." She raised her bow. A broad smile appeared on her lips as she said, "That and I want to make my grandpa proud of me." He let a tear drop from his eye. Her statement struck a chord with him. He was overjoyed to learn that May was willing to put her life in danger to protect him and their girlfriend. He would hurl repulsors at anyone who dared to call her a bad person. The girl gladly returned the hug that he and Momo had given her. They planted a kiss on her cheeks, and she smiled brightly, nuzzling them back. These were the times that Izuku genuinely cherished. In addition, it appeared to lessen his guilt to some extent. He thus benefited in both ways. With pink powder all over his face, Shinso-kun stammered, "So are you guys like an item or something?" during his question. Oh, so they made their friend uncomfortable without telling him. Whoops. Nezu sipped his tea and glanced at little Iida. Teen was trying to sit as straight as possible, but occasionally he would peek, displaying signs of nervousness. He said in a cordial tone, "No need to be this tense." Though his posture remained unchanged, Boy replied, "Right, of course, principal." Inquiringly, "How's your brother doing?" he asked. A tiny smile could be seen on the student's lips. "Great actually. Tomorrow doctor is going to do a first fitting of the prosthetic that Midoriya-san and Hatsume-san made. If everything goes right, then by the end of the week he's going to start a physiotherapy." That was information that pleased Nezu. He set down his teacup and said, "That's good. Wish him luck from me. Now, young Iida, do you know why I wanted to talk with you?" "No, sir," Teen answered, instantly assuming his upright stance again. He explained, observing the boy grow anxious once more. "It's about the hero killer accident." Nezu smiled kindly and said, "Relax, from what I've heard from Aizawa-san, you know that your actions were wrong. But I'm still going to propose you something. Would you like to go and see one of the school's psychologists? They're ready to help you with any kind of problem that may trouble you." Young Iida parted his lips in response, then snapped it shut. His brows furrowed, indicating he was considering it carefully. Boy said, I would like that," with a tone of gratitude. "I'm pleased to hear this. I'll inform them. Most likely tomorrow will be your first meeting." Nezu thanked the teen as he was leaving and peered through the window. That other student was in need of assistance, which he would be happy to provide. Even so, he was taken aback when Hound Dog told him about Todoroki the young dog. Boy spoke with a specialist on his own and expressed his desire to avoid becoming his sperm donor. The realization that his problems were real and that he wanted to solve them on his own relieved a burden from his shoulders. However, Nezu surmised that the words and deeds of young Midoriya had a significant influence on it. He inquired, a little anxious, "Alan, can you tell how was young Bakugo's first day in the Gen Ed?" Upon perusing Hakamada-san's report, he reached the conclusion that enough was enough. Putting civilians in danger because the boy was upset was a huge step over the line. "You want the sugar-coated version or no? Artificial intelligence?" In astonishment, I replied. He questioned whether he still had the strength to listen to the student through everything, thinking that just the general description will be enough. Alan casually replied, he wasn't far from becoming little boy. That awful, Nezu had almost ready expulsion papers if the teen's attitude didn't improve. Shame. Bakugo could grow up to be a legendary hero with his. Nezu shook his head, realizing what was said. No matter how unique or unusual someone's quirk was, it was never acceptable to let them get away with anything. Particularly when trying to become a hero and even after you do. To raise your mood, I've something that you'll be glad to watch. Nezu headed to his computer, intrigued by this. There was a video with the title, From Caterpillar to Butterfly, that was ready to play. Soon after the movie began, his office was filled with his joyful, almost manic laughter. May was excited about today. And it wasn't about it being a weekend, meaning the ability to make babies all day long. No, the reason for her ecstasy was different. Izuku and Momo proposed that it was time to meet with everyone's parents. At first she didn't really get it, but in her head it meant spending more time with the two of them, which always was good. So the plan was made. During Saturday they would see her family, hang out a bit and then go to Izuku's place. On Sunday they would go on a date, ending it at Momo's. Right now she was leading her boyfriend and girlfriend to her home. She lived in a rather peaceful neighborhood that was near a huge mall and commercial area on the suburbs. While walking, she showed them a small park, where she tested some of her first babies. She still didn't understand why she was banned from entering it. It wasn't her fault that one particular baby kept exploding. Her house was a one-story building with a simple shape and garage. There was an attic that her parents renovated to make rooms for all of them. Unfortunately, there was no garden or some kind of courtyard to test babies, but it was okay now, seeing as she had the UA's facility to do it. Inside was decorated nicely, at least that was what Mom said. Woman was the interior designer, so she had to know. Sitting them in the living room, that held a lot of family pictures on the walls, May called her parents. It was finally the time. First Dad came. He was tall and had broad shoulders. He had that weird thing for keeping his mustache growing as long as he could. Before Mom got mad at him and shaved the whole thing off herself. Then Mom arrived with a tray of snack and teas. The two of them were somewhat similar in body shape. They were small, had large chest and amber eyes. Actually, now that she thought of it, The only thing she got from her dad was the pink color of hair. Genetics were weird. She peeked at her lovers. They were slightly tense, but kept smiling. Glancing at Dad, she saw him making that silly, strict face that never worked. Especially with that ridiculous mustache of his. "May, can you introduce your friends to us?" Mom asked politely. Grabbing their hands, she grinned widely. "Those are Momo and Izuku, my girlfriend and boyfriend." There was a silence, which was strange. In her home things weren't really quiet. Someone always did something. Dad sighed loudly and looked at her with weird expression. "Honey, I'm glad that you're trying to keep our hopes high, but really? Making androids to show us that you won't be alone?" He said, somewhat saddened. And that was really weird, seeing as he was a jokester. Mom hit him hard on the shoulder. "Dear." Suddenly there was a loud laughter from Dad. "Sorry, I just couldn't let this opportunity to pass," he stated, before cackling some more, dragging Mom into it. Are they always like that?" Momo whispered, visibly troubled by the situation. "Yeah, it's normal here," she replied with a shrug. "Well, at least now we know why May is so optimistic about everything," Izuku said quietly with a chuckle. She quirked her brow at that, not knowing what he meant by this. Her girlfriend nodded at his words. Whatever they had on their minds must meant something good, so she just smiled at them. "I'm sorry for my husband. Don't mind him," Mom said, smiling apologetically at them. "My name is Miko and this clown over here is Daishi." "It's a pleasure to meet you," Momo said, bowing her head lightly. "Yes, we're glad to be here," Izuku stated, mirroring the bow. After that her parents started to ask some questions that, according to internet, were basic on those types of occasion. Things like, how they met, how long they were together, some plans for future and so on. Then Mom took out, seemingly from nowhere, an album with baby pictures. What followed after this was nearly an hour of her parents telling stories about her childhood adventures and her boyfriend and girlfriend making ooh and ah at her as a kid. May didn't understood why they were doing it, but seeing her family and her lovers interact like that was a good sign in her mind. "Still, I didn't know that you have a brother," Momo said, pointing at the picture of her and older boy tinkering with an engine. "I didn't say anything?" She was a bit surprised by that fact. "Nope," Izuku commented before taking his cup of tea. "While we're at it," Dad begun, a smirk on his lips and glint in the eye. "How many babies are you planning to have?" Her boyfriend coughed violently, choking on his drink. His face was all red. Peeking at Momo, she saw the girl in similar state, touching her cheeks and mumbling about not being ready. "But we already have babies," May said with furrowed brows. She already had babies with Izuku and about to make one with Momo. All of their inventions were their precious, beautiful children. Mom chuckled with amused smile on her lips. "I agree with my husband, seeing as our son is a lost cause in relations with girls." Then she gazed at her. "And what we mean are real babies, from flesh and blood." She felt her face heat up, matching the state her lovers were in. Real babies, they're real kids. Up until now, she never thought about it. Even after reading about it on the internet, she never considered that in the future they would have children on their own. Not only their inventions. For the rest of the day she wondered if her kids would have fluffy, pink hair and green eyes. The visit in Hatsume household went well in Izuku's humble opinion. May's parents were easygoing, bright and caring. He could easily see all those traits in his girlfriend. As for the kids' talk, he was sure that they would connect well on that matter with his mom. But now he was dreading about the meeting with his parent. Knowing Mom, it could involve a lot of tears. Like literal gallons of it. Just before entering their flat, he looked at May and Momo, giving them an uneasy smile. "Fair warning. My mom tends to be really emotional." His comment made them quirk their brows with quizzical expressions on their faces. They would have to see for themselves. Opening the doors and letting them coming first, as a gentleman he was, he called, "Mom, I'm back, and I brought guests." "Guests? You didn't tell me anything about it?" He didn't. He wanted it to be surprise. Mom came and stood in the corridor, gazing at them. He saw her eyes light up at his companions. Smiling widely, he took girls' hands and lifted them up. "Mom, those are Mei Hatsume and Momo Yaoyorozu, my girlfriends." At first there was a silence, that meant Mom getting over a shock and wrapping her head around the bomb that he just dropped at her. But after a few seconds tears of joy flowed from her eyes freely. "My baby is growing up," Mom exclaimed in joy. What followed was them watching as she fretted over not being dressed for the occasion, not having a prepared meal or cake. their flat not being clean enough and so on. It was somehow amusing to watch. He left them in the living room as he went to prepare drinks and snacks. Coming with the tray, he saw something that would no doubt left him utterly embarrassed. Mom was showing his baby pictures. How did she found those albums? He made sure to hide them yesterday to not allow this situation to happen. Did Alan betray him yet again? There was one particular picture that made girls stop. Him as a 3 years old, dressed in all-white onesie with a hood on, smiling brightly at the camera. His girlfriends were somehow enchanted by it. Cute. Momo whispered, her cheeks dusted with pink. Bunny. May commented with shining eyes. Putting down the drinks, he snatched the album, much to the chagrin of the girls. He sent Mom an annoyed look. She just smiled at him innocently, most likely enjoying his misery. They sat in silence for a few moments, before Momo said, "I can't help but ask. Why aren't you asking us about anything, Midoriya-san?" Mom smiled kindly at them. "You can call me Inko. As for why, Izuku told me much about you too." "He did?" They asked in sync. "Yes. Almost ever since he started high school, every day when he comes home, he tells me about what the three of you did." Then she gazed at him with slight annoyance. "But what he didn't inform me was the fact that you three were dating." "I just wanted to surprise you," he replied weakly, scratching his cheek. "Hey, Izuku? Where is your dad?" May asked in curiosity. He frowned a little. His dad was sort of a sour subject for him. "He's away. He's working as a delegate between companies in USA and China," Mom explained in slightly somber tone. "China?" Momo questioned, gazing at Mom. "Yes, Hisashi is Chinese so he knows language well, which proved to be beneficial for getting a promotion." "I guess he's rarely at home?" May questioned, touching his hand. "Yeah, last time he was here 2 years ago. Not even for a week," he said with small scowl. It may seem heartless, but he didn't care much for a man who was absent in his life since he was 4. It was more about his mom, who was saddened by the lack of her husband. "Now, enough about it," Mom told them, waving her hand. "Actually there is something that I want to ask you." Alarms rung inside his head. He knew that happy, dreamy tone Mom just used. He knew it too well. He needed to save the day and not let her. "When can I expect grandchildren?" His girlfriends adopted probably a new shade of red. He groaned loudly, throwing his head back. God really must hate him. Momo was overjoyed. Their date consisted of going to cinema to see a movie that all of them were interested in, and then a walk around the small carnival that came to the Musutafu. Now they were nearing her home and she could say that she was getting slightly nervous. While she was sure that Izuku was now loaded, her living conditions were the most luxurious among the three of them. Not that the homes of her boyfriend and girlfriend were bad. She admitted in her mind that May's parents were just like she imagined them to be. Hatsume family was a lively bunch of people. As for Inko-san, she could see the similarities between the woman and her boyfriend. Not only in their looks, but in the characters. Although now she was sure that Izuku was mixed. He never looked like full-blooded Japanese to her, not that it was a problem for her. She stopped next to the intercom and punched a code to open the gates to her home. Turning around, she witnessed her lovers gazing blankly at the building and its surroundings. "What's wrong?" she asked, slightly scared of potential answer. Izuku looked at her and gave weak chuckle. "Momo, sweetie, I think we need to redefine your word for house, as it's not correct at all." May nodded dumbly, still taking the sights. She didn't understood them. Sure, her house was a giant mansion that had a huge courtyard and lovely garden, but it was normal to her. Maybe this had something to do with being filthy rich, as her classmates put it. Dragging them inside and navigating to the living room, they were greeted by her parents. She told them earlier that she would come with guests. And seeing as they wanted to meet Izuku earlier, this was a perfect opportunity to surprise them. It was often said that she was a carbon copy of her mother. She had hard time disagreeing with it. She was as tall as her, had the same figure, even similar voices. Only difference was with their eyes, that she got from her father. As for the father, he was a tall and lean, with some cat features, such as having longer canines and sharper nails. Sometimes even his behavior was the one of that animal. Taking naps during the day and wanting to be pet non-stop. "Momo, who are your friends?" Mother asked, but there was something strange in her tone, like she was expecting something. Taking hands of her lovers, she smiled lightly. "Mother, father, meet Izuku, Midoriya and Mei Hatsume, my boyfriend and girlfriend." "Yes." Mother exclaimed joyously, striking a victory pose. Then she turned to her husband, who had a sour expression. "Pay up." Her jaw went slack. This was a complete opposite of how her mother behaved. Normally in public, or while having guests, she was a prim woman, who didn't have a head in the clouds. At home she dropped the act, showing her affection and telling her that she loved her deeply. But this? Father pulled out a wallet and handed out a rather generous stack of money to mother, who took it and hid in her pants. "Sorry for the scene. My wife is a gambler through and through. When our princess started talking about you two almost every day, she made a bet with me that Momo is polyamorous." Father explained, before grinning widely. "Also, nice to see you again, kids. How is the company?" "Hi." Mei happily replied. "Hello, sir. So far so good," Izuku said with a small nod. She blinked at them. "Wait, how do you know each other?" "I've spent most of my time with them on their internship," Father answered with a shrug. Then he turned towards her boyfriend. "You don't seem surprised." Teen chuckled slightly. "I had my suspicions. After internship I checked the Miyashiro's site and saw you and your wife on some of the pictures there." "Smart boy." Mother commented with smirk. After sitting down on the couch, maids delivered tea and biscuits. Right now Momo had no idea what to expect. She was sure that her parents didn't know Izuku and Mei, but looks like she was utterly wrong. She was pleased, seeing them talk normally with each other. Fortunately for her, there wasn't any album with her baby pictures or embarrassing stories from her childhood. Although she wished that her parents would stop calling her princess, she was too big for it. "Now that we've chatted a bit, we would like to ask you some questions, Izuku-san," Mother said, making her boyfriend tense a bit. "Were you the one that saved our daughter from the fall during exercise?" Father asked gravely. She was a bit surprised by this. While she herself didn't tell a thing about it, she knew that principal called them to inform of the unpleasant incident. Now that she thought about it, her parents were pressing any charges against Bakugo, meaning that Nezu-san must have left something to himself. "Yes, sir," Izuku answered, sitting straight. "We wanted to thank you for that," Mother said with kind smile. "That and for serving justice for what happened during festival. There's another question we wanted to ask you, and we don't want to be rude, it's just human curiosity." Father explained, sounding genuine about his intentions. "We know that for the rest of your internship you've spent under a hero. Are you, by any chances, planning to become one?" Almost instantly she took his hand in hers. Mei joined her palm soon after it. She remembered that it was something akin to a taboo subject for him. Mostly due to the treatment he gained from society, which always saddened and disturbed her. He smiled at her and their girlfriend, squeezing their hands lightly, before turning to her parents. "My mom once said that my first word was hero," he said with small chuckle. "Becoming a hero is a dream of mine. And while I do lack a quirk, I have my brain that I've packed with all sorts of information. Someone made me realize that a person doesn't need one to become a hero. That my actions are more important than having a flashy superpower." His tone was serene. "I take that you're planning on using that armor of yours to become one," Mother said in knowing voice. "Yes, ma'am." She watched as her parents talked for a moment as hushed tones. She changed her position on the couch to allow her and Mei to hug Izuku. She knew that he still had some doubts about being a hero after what happened with Stain, so that their comfort was needed. He looked grateful for it. Suddenly her parents stopped their talk and turned to them, smiling lightly. "We've decided to support you," Mother said, making them raise their eyebrows. "What we mean by that is that you have the support of our family and company. For the record, we're not doing it because you're dating our daughter," Father explained further. There was no way that she could hide her surprise and joy for their decision. I don't know what to say," Izuku whispered loudly. Mother smirked slyly, which didn't sit well with Momo. "You can start by calling us Mom and Dad, you too, Mei-san." Her girlfriend nodded happily, no doubt glad that she didn't need to be formal. Her boyfriend went absolutely red on his face, mumbling something under his nose. And her? She though, that after living all those years with her mother she knew the woman well. But apparently she was greatly mistaken. After some more chatting, she accompanied her lovers to the train station. She wasn't exactly ready to kiss the two for the goodbye in front of her parents just yet. But she was glad that they liked Izuku and Mei. The thought about them being against her relationship utterly terrified her. When she came back, Father called her to come to the TV. He said that there was an announcement about the new hero law. This was a bit unusual. There weren't many changes to the existing hero laws, and a new one being made was really surprising. Nonetheless, as a future heroine, she needed to know them all. So she went to the living room and listened to the speaker. But quickly her and her parents' faces fell. Momo felt some tears escape her eyes. The news shattered her, but she feared about what it would do to her loved one.
So this was it for today. I will continue this story in next part. Till then, bye bye.